What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another live stream in these random Star Wars EU streams that I've been doing. We've got a lot to discuss today, but before we do, Brady told me something backstage that is absolutely shocking, and he's got to tell the viewers because I had no idea. Brady?
So the man famous for Mr. Mom, Batman, Ken from Toy Story 3, Michael Keaton is the actor who voices Chick Hicks from the Cars films.
What?
Yep.
I had absolutely no idea. That's insane.
Yeah, you know.
What do we think of that panel? We all know
shocked.
Pixar Cars, of course, right?
Wait, who does he voice in Cars? Loki wasn't listening.
Chick Hicks, the green car that says
The bad guy car
a
with the
controversial
mustache.
word.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, Batman is Chick Hicks. That's crazy.
Yep. He's also Vulture. He's also. Who else? What other characters does he
He
play?
was in the hit film Morbius.
He was asked about that, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't know what they were doing."
Yeah, I know. That's so funny. All right, but the real reason why we're here, one of them, Revenge of the Sith is turning 20. That's kind of crazy. How do we feel about that, boys?
I feel very old.
I
I can't believe I've been a Star Wars fan ever since Shadows of the Empire came out in '96. Next year, that's going to be 30 years. So that is insane. So I remember back during the Billboard campaign in 2016, one of the talking points was don't throw away 40 years of EU history, 1976 to 2016. So it was 40 years back then. To think I was a fan 30 years, and now Revenge of the Sith is 20 years old. That's unbelievable.
That's pretty good. Did you see it in theaters, Scott?
Yeah, I remember seeing it in theaters.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Let me
I
put
remember
it this
episode
way.
1 in theaters.
I wasn't alive in 2005.
Oh my
I
gosh.
was 8 months old when Revenge of the Sith came out. This year I
I
turned
was 4.
21. So
I was-
just think of it like that.
I was not even in the womb yet in 2005.
Bro wasn't even thought of yet.
I was a few months old when that shit came out.
I
Yeah.
was when Revenge of the Sith came out, I was 6 years old, and it was my first PG-13 movie I got to
Whoa, at 6?
see at 6 years
Your
old.
parents
My
were rock
mom,
and roll, weren't they?
my mom watched it before,
Gotcha.
and then she was like, "This is okay for you to watch."
The parental test screening.
Yeah, I never understood why it was PG-13 because I was like, "There's no cuss words in it."
Well, they set Anakin on fire on Mustafar.
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
think
That part,
that's kind of violent.
I think I knew that
Yeah.
it wasn't real, and so I didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't click as violent. However, this was also the first PG-13 movie and Star Wars movie that my stepdaughter had seen. And this was before I met her, but her uncle put it on because she likes Yoda. She thought Yoda was cool, but he forgot to pause it before Anakin got burnt to death, and she was traumatized from Star Wars for a little bit.
Ooh.
So I had to break that and be like, okay, we won't watch that one.
You had to palate cleanse with Ewoks.
Yes, that's how I got her on.
As everyone should.
Yes.
Thank you.
I grew up in a home where I got to watch Nightmare on Elm Street at like 5, so when I did watch Revenge of the Sith, it didn't bother me too much. So
What do we all think of the quality of the film? Do you think it's aged well, 20 years on?
There's
I'd
some
say so.
parts.
Dude, given what Disney's been giving us, hell yeah, it's aged well. But
I
even
can-
without
I think it's the
that,
best of the prequels.
even without that, it's a great film. Even without that, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a great film. It definitely the best of the prequels.
I think the effects have aged well too.
Yeah, I still view it as the last real Star Wars film. I still see it as relatively recent because, in a way,
I mean,
as EU fans, it is the last Star Wars
It
film.
is the last Star Wars film, yeah.
So,
And yet that's still been 2
quite
decades.
literally.
TCW.
Right.
Yeah, I can't believe. I'm 4 years older
Oh,
than that
Brady,
movie.
When it comes to saying like aging well, like what do we mean here?
Effects, story. Do we think it holds up? Do we think it's still good?
Because I think the things like the score, of course, that holds up. I mean, a John Williams score can never really like age poorly. Like, that's kind of impossible.
Here's
But,
a
like
here's
the
a
effects, the pacing is good. It's like the only thing I can really say is a negative about it is like some of the acting, not like not dialogue exactly, but just like some execution of certain lines is kind of weird or funny in an unintentional type of way.
Yeah. Which
Like
is kind of par for the
anything
course
in
of the
particular that comes to mind?
Shit, I mean, my little green friend, like something like that, or
I love that
another happy
Sith
landing.
Lord,
A Sith Lord.
a Sith
all of
Lord.
the memes.
I mean, that's
There
just
are
Samuel
all
Jackson,
the
though,
memes
and like
are just
everything.
like unintentional, like funny dialogue moments.
Definitely. Yeah, I can see that. Hayden, so I watched the Obi-Wan Anakin fight, and I thought Hayden was decent in it. Like when I was younger, I thought he was a pretty bad actor, but as I got older, I began to appreciate it more. But I still think Ewan McGregor completely sells that scene, like way more than Hayden Christensen does, just in my opinion.
I didn't notice prequel hate until the sequels started coming out, and their whole narrative was prequels are bad. Watch our movies.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
there
heard
was
that
a
a
lot
lot.
of prequel hate back in the day, but I think episode 3 is generally viewed as the best one, and it doesn't get the same criticisms episode 1 and 2 got. I don't think it's directed toward little kids in the way the other two films kind of are.
Right.
Definitely episode 1, and to a lesser extent episode 2. It really gives you a lot of action all the way through. There's no real dull parts of it, in my opinion. Yeah. Maybe a little bit when they get to the cave planet, the one with a lot of cliffs that Obi-Wan rides, that dinosaur thing.
Oh, Utapau.
Utapau, yeah. But I thought particularly the scene in the opera is very good. The dialogue between Chancellor Palpatine and Anakin, that is flawless. And I think it's the best.
Do the classic line, "Have you heard the tragedy?" Can Titus impersonate that? I don't know. Titus?
Oh, what line are we talking about?
The meme line about a certain moon.
A certain moon? What are you talking about?
Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Oh, a certain moon. I think you said moon. I was like, what? Like, that's no
moon?
Moon. That's a super Death Star, super laser, whatever the hell Alec McGinnis said.
That's no moon.
Did I ever tell you about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Great
Honestly,
line.
it's kind of funny how like Hayden Christensen like turns his head and like, how do you learn this power?
That is kind of funny.
They're kind of whispering because they're talking during a show, technically.
Would y'all go see that show? Would y'all go to Squid Lake? Is what I believe.
Yeah,
no, I wouldn't want to see half naked Mon Cala woman swim around.
Isn't it like a symbol of impregnation?
It may be the best written scene of the entire 6 films. In terms of dialogue, at least.
Wasn't Palpatine gonna tell him that he was his dad in that, but then George Lucas cut it out?
Really?
That's
what I heard.
Technically, he said.
I mean, it is
influence the midichlorians to create life.
Yeah,
that is true. That is true.
Which I mean,
overall,
they did that.
Does anyone put Revenge of the Sith higher than any of the OT films here?
Fuck no.
Yes.
I put it higher than.
It's better than Return of the Jedi.
Wow, Return of the Jedi is my favorite of them all. So.
Oh, really? Yeah. I have some problems on Endor where it slows down, particularly with Leia's dialogue where she talks to Luke and says, "Why must you confront him?" I always thought that was really bad, but I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that. My favorite of the prequels is still Attack of the Clones, just on a personal level. I don't know why.
I think 3 as like a personal favorite is higher than A New Hope, but I think A New Hope is a better movie. Like just by the movie standard that movie set up, like in the history of film, that one is I don't know. It's easily debatable that if that one's better than Empire or not.
Mm.
I'd say.
Does
Well, I
does
think
everyone have
Empire's
a-
written better, but yeah.
Yeah.
Does everyone have a favorite meme line from Revenge of the Sith? If you had to choose one.
On my Facebook page, I have a little I noticed how a lot of people, especially around where I live, they'll have like Bible verses.
Mm.
And so I put hello there, and then I put it as Ewan
'Hello there.
27 something, like just as like
Another happy landing.
That's a good one too. I
Sith
think hello
Lords
there's
are
my
our
favorite of
speciality.
them all.
because he says it at 57
put the
minutes
hour mark
and
in.
57 minutes and 12 seconds into the movie.
So you put that as Ewan 5722 or something like that?
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I think my favorite line. It's not like a meme line in a sense, like it's like popular, but it's just like a meme I always thought was funny as a kid. Was when Anakin goes to Mustafar and cuts up all like fucking separatist leaders, and what's his name? Newt Gunray. Like he starts begging for peace. Lord Sidious promised us peace. He only wants It's just like the fucking like abrupt scream. It always made me laugh, bro.
After reading the EU with the whole relationship between Newt Gunray and Palpatine, like that scene is almost like very sad and tragic.
It's kind of satisfying too.
Also, yeah,
That is true.
from a
Yeah.
Republic side.
Anakin turned him into sushi.
That is true. Speaking of Neimoidian death,
Yeah,
Fine Editions,
Japanese
I was
sushi.
gonna ask you one question. Fine Editions. Do you remember, in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, where like I don't remember if the character has a name, but I know like it's like Neimoidian worker on the invisible hand, like disobeyed Grievous.
Yes.
Grievous just, like grabs the back of their fucking head, and, like just slams them into like the computer, and like they said he crushed his whole head.
Yeah, and then
Brutal.
they had to get another guy to come in, and that's who they had in the movie.
That's
No
amazing.
wonder he was all jumpy.
That's a good transition into our second topic, which is the Revenge of the Sith novel has a new anniversary edition annotated hardcover. What are our thoughts? Is anyone getting it?
I'm not impressed with it. It seems very similar to what they did with Heir to the Empire in 2011 with I guess it was the 20th anniversary there. I just wonder who is buying this? Who doesn't have a hardcover of Revenge of the Sith? Who is this aimed at? What is the market segment they're trying to go for here? Is this aimed toward EU fans? You would think because Revenge of the Sith has so many references to the EU throughout the book, it might be geared towards us. But why would we want a standalone hardcover for episode 3 if we didn't have 1 and 2? And there's been so many omnibus copies of this. I think Books A Million did one in 2018.
Yeah.
Even the original hardcover, the first edition, is readily available on the secondary market. So I just wonder, who is this aimed at?
Well, Scott, I gotta stop you though, because it's not just like a hardcover. I was explaining this to Lance. There's over 150 pages of annotations by Stover. So now there's more to it than just like a normal hardcover.
I saw an interview where the guy who helped him put it together said that this wasn't just like a thing where the company was doing it. Stover like made all the annotations like he was talking to the reader. Like he was like sharing behind the scenes info about it. It's a really cool approach. I read the previews that they did, and it does look pretty good. Now, does that mean I'll go out of my way to spend 60 clams on this? I don't know. I'm conflicted there. But I do think that I don't know. I do think I'd be curious to read the PDFs when they become available as well,
Well, if you're such a prominent EU fan and you're not buying it, what does that say to the rest of us? Who is this directed to?
Yeah,
and it may be great. It may be great annotations. I don't know if it's sort of the same things he said over the years. I know Matt Stover's done hundreds of interviews about the novelization over the years. So is this new information? Is this stuff that is just repeated I don't know. It's too early to say, I guess. But from what has been released, it looks like it looks good. I just wonder, what is the strategy in releasing this? Is there more to come? Are they going to do other anniversary editions of certain books? We saw the Inkstone Press do exclusive hardcovers in limited numbers of copies.
Yeah.
Now, are they just trying to sell a limited number of copies at a high price point just to rake in some money? Or is this a strategic effort to try to get us some new content, even if it's not an EU story? Those are all questions I'm curious about.
Yeah.
I think Matt Wilkins is in the chat, and he said it best that it is for it's aimed at casual fans who love episode 3. So probably that I'd get. Maybe also a little bone to us, the hardcore fan that already has a copy of it. But I think that's probably the main part of it, because they see how all of these younger people are clamoring about how episode 3 is like the best Star Wars movie ever, all these Clone Wars fans, which I'm surprised they haven't rewritten it to fit the new canon narrative, because it's a pro expanded universe book.
Right. And I think they have made a younger reader version, like a young adult version of episode 3.
Yep.
When Disney bought it, I think they did that for all the books, actually. But why? That doesn't answer the question, why release episode 3 as a standalone? Are there all of these fans out there that just want more episode 3 content that somehow don't have the original hardcover? And why would you want to read that by itself and not read episode 1 and 2?
Well, my thing to this question is kind of like, let's put our heads together. We're all EU fans here. The book is like well known in the fandom. It is Matthew Stover. I just don't really think that those other novelizations are not as well regarded as Revenge of the Sith by Matthew Stover.
Yeah.
There's really not too much that's differently added, or when because you know about the whole thing of Matthew Stover extensively. What was it? He was like, it's like he talked to George about it, or someone like ran through like George, with like his writing process. Something regarding his writing process. There was like, I don't know. Can you like help fill in the blanks of what I'm saying? Like, do you understand what I'm talking about?
So he, a lot of the other prequel authors did meet with George Lucas,
right?
But I think he met with him more.
Right.
He also added in more context to it with like the expanded universe, worked it all in together,
right,
to kind of have this last Star Wars film.
Yes, it's also true that Matthew Stover, compared to Salvatore and Terry Brooks, Stover was a lot more familiar with the EU in general. So it wasn't that hard for him to take things he knew about the EU and add to the story in such a way that made it more interesting and more engaging for more EU fans. Hey, Chris, how you doing? They used him for his benefit, and he got the nod to write this because of his work with the other EU novels, books like Traitor and that. So,
I thought it was that like he, like, did you mention that he said he did meet with George about writing Revenge of the Sith?
He did, yes.
Because I thought it was something along the lines like him or James Luceno, had met with George about the writing process of all of it.
I think they both did for different things.
And I just bring that up because I feel like that Revenge of the Sith as a book, it has a lot more writing on it than like any of the other novelizations.
I think one of the good out of this is with the commentary that Stover's going to provide. It could potentially, not like we need more of this, but he could potentially like add like pro EU quotes, like basically showing that the EU was more important than what people thought it was. And like I said, not that we need quotes for that, but it could provide more evidence that the EU was canon. It was all in continuity, all that stuff that we know.
I was wondering how much the annotations will go into that. Like,
have you guys already seen some of the pages they've put out?
Yeah.
One thing I thought that was interesting was like he actually references like one of his other books in one of the annotations, right? To your point, Lance. He says like, by the way, this will become important in Shadows of Mindor, which I thought was cool.
That is
Yeah.
really cool.
So
I'm-
I think that could be a really big positive of the book. It could be a really pro EU book, unintentionally.
I'm really excited about all of the annotations when it comes to this. I think it's great, but I think it's a missed opportunity too at the same time, because how easy would it have been for there to be a short story in here, like with Heir to the Empire's 20th edition, right? Have Stover pen like something 10 pages. It would have been amazing. I just think it's a missed opportunity overall. I still think there's some really cool stuff here. It's a little expensive for me.
Is it $60?
$60 is what I was
Brennan.
seeing for the pre-order.
I know what you want, Brennan. Yeah, 60 bones, dude. Brennan, I know what you want, man.
What's that?
You want a short story by Stover about the Mustafarians, the North and the Southern Mustafarians riding their big ass fleas, harvesting like lava and shit. Yeah, you want a story about that, don't you? Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't be just anything. Like, I think we could get something a little deeper than that. But hey, if it was a new
I know
story
what
about
you want. You want a story
Mustafarians.
about like the Utapauans and how like it's revealed that Actually, no, I'm not made a joke. I'm not even made a joke. I was gonna say there's a reveal that the Grand Inquisitor was there, but like, no, that's a bad joke.
We'll take anything that's new that isn't new canon.
Exactly.
Anything in addition that's pro EU. But we also there's this thing where it's a limited number of copies, right? So they're not trying to max out.
How limited is it? Do you remember the number? Is it 1,000?
I forget how much it was, but so the price point is higher because they're making only so many copies, and they have that factored in. It's the same way with the Inkstone.
More
copies.
expensive than Inkstone. I think it's double the price of the Inkstones, which makes sense. This is a bit more special than those.
Well, mine was 50, including
mine was like 35. I got mine shipped to the UK, so maybe that helped me.
You guys want to?
I was just going to say 60 is a lot, but again, and I've missed a lot of what you guys have talked about, but for anyone who's just hearing about this or sort of thinking that's objectively a lot, it's a super duper deluxe edition. It's got all the modern trends that the Inkstone books run with, right? The painted, so it's not like you're getting nothing for 60. It does make you wonder whether there's going to be like a paperback version, or I think someone might have mentioned Kindle or something. I'd be intrigued to know about that. I remember a couple of years back when the Essential Legends collection started, I was cynical out of the gate. And I remember when I first heard about it, Scott, I think I wrote to you and I said, what is this? Is this maybe new EU, right? In the context annotations. I've become really positive about this. And so I guess in some ways I'm just here to sort of finally swing my own sort of personal pendulum back towards, I'm going to be good about this. I'm going to be a good little fan about this. Yes, it's a lot of money. You get something, you do get some value for the amount you hand over. From what I've seen in the annotations, they didn't blow me away, but at least there's no references to the new canon. So, it's Stover. It's maybe my favorite. It's maybe the best EU book in my opinion. I think it's great. And I sort of feel like if we're waving magic wands about all the additional stuff he could have put in, that they should have put in additional stories, other books they should do this for, I completely agree. But this is moving things in the right direction. And I think in particular, relative to the Inkstone stuff, what I found fascinating about that a couple of years ago when they announced that was that after all of these years, Del Rey is finally letting people play with the license. Again, they're not doing anything with it for the EU, right? They're going to let some boutique publisher now come out with these silly things that are painted. This is one step closer to Del Rey finally giving us new stories, right? So first they let some boutique publisher just reprint books like Dawn of the Jedi that, as beautiful those books are, no one was clamoring for a deluxe hardcover edition of. Now it's like a deluxe hardcover of an absolute fan favorite with annotations by the author. That's getting closer to what we said for years about Essential Legends, right? There should be a one paragraph introduction from the author. Who knows? This is one step closer to finally getting more EU. So I wanted to kind of just be a rare sort of like voice of positivity about this.
No, I agree. It is a step in the right direction. I don't mean to nitpick. I can't help but wonder what the strategy is behind this. Is this meant for us? Is this meant as a gift for us, or is it not? Is it for just general episode 3 fans that for some reason don't have a hardcover?
I think it's interesting that they didn't do anything like this for the Phantom 25-year anniversary. Was that last year? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe it is because Stover's stuff is a lot more popular, and they know that we like it so much.
Well, and in '99, which was the 20th anniversary, where they had, where Celebration was centered around Phantom Menace, you'd think something like this would come out then. But again, maybe it's just taken this much time for them to finally realize, even if they're milking us, they finally realize that there's a bit of an audience. But again, it does. Yeah, you're right, Scott. I mean, who is this for entirely? I mean, Celebration is happening right now in Japan. It's focused on Revenge of the Sith. So it's not a surprise that something like this would come out now. But then again, you have to ask, like, why not earlier for other things? I just hope they correct that mistake down the road and that we get deluxe editions for the prequels. There's certain, yeah. Anyway, so I just think, yeah,
could be a way to celebrate Matthew Stover and his contribution as well. This could be a benefit to him and not so much us. And
that is nice that he's getting recognition as well, that they brought him back to do these annotations. Anyone who's met Matthew Stover, which I was privileged to do, he's a great guy. He loves to talk about this stuff. He's a huge fan himself. And so he's just so happy to share this information. So I think it's great that they've given him an opportunity to do that on a wider kind of scale, to just put all his thoughts down.
And given how thoughtful he is about this and how likely he is to want to sort of talk about this stuff and in a thoughtful way, yeah, it's probably no surprise. He probably said yes the second he got the email to do this. But but again, I'll put my cynical hat back on for a second. I hope this doesn't mean then now he's getting recruited to write some new canon stories, right? So
is it an olive branch? Oh, that would be an interesting.
Maybe he'll stand his ground and say no. Unless it's a new EU story. I'll do it, but I want to write an EU story first.
But the Heir to the Empire hardcover was the 20th anniversary one, right?
Yeah,
that was 20 years. And that's a brand new short story. I really wish they'd gone that route too. Annotations are great, but just a little something, and then it would be no question the price. I would
but again,
instantly,
But we're all nutty EU fans. I mean, I think the thing that we need to really be careful about, and this is the only thing about this that really worries me going forward for the next year while we wait for this to come out, and then while we sort of like bask in the reflections about it, because it's coming out in the fall, I think, right? If I remember correctly. This gets back to the classic problem that everyone faced immediately after April 25th, 2014. Are the prequel novels canon or not, right? Or are they legends or whatever? 99% of mainstream fans don't know, don't care, right? So they're not going to put a new EU story in there just to further confuse this, right? And again, to like the cynical questions about like, who is this for? Well, they just hope it's for mainstream Star Wars fans, right? Who don't wade into these issues, right? They'll read it. They'll get an incredibly wonderfully written book that helps make more sense about the films. Won't know that it's an EU book, right? So
maybe it'll be a rabbit hole type thing. Like if they read the annotations and he's like, this is going to be used in Luke Skywalker in the Shadows of Mindor. They're like, oh shoot, I'll check that out. And then the spiral begins. They'll find themselves on old Wizards of the Coast RPGs in a decade reading.
Oh yeah, no, that, and I'm sure that will happen on the margin. But again, just realistically, I can't imagine either Lucasfilm greenlighting or Del Rey even wanting to play with adding more EU here as a separate standalone story, just given like the intentional confusion that I'm sure Lucasfilm appreciates about the prequel novelizations, right? They don't want that secret out too widely, right? That FYI mainstream fans, these actually aren't your new canon books. So
this is kind of interesting. So if they had put a short story inside the novel but didn't say which canon, so like no statement on
I was just about to say something like that as a devil's advocate. Like, could you write a story that is so far removed and I don't want to say bland, but it could work in either canon, and they were just ambiguous about it, similar to how James Luceno wrote Tarkin, right? We know that's a canon book, but really a lot of it could be either canon if they didn't go so far as to specify. And you could do that to a greater degree in a short story where the characters could just relate to background characters from Revenge of the Sith or something.
Well, you put Ahsoka in it, and you
I was just going to say
There you go. Also, Brennan, because that reminded me, what is that short story series that was in Star Wars Insider that like it was transitioned from like the first story being EU
Blade Squadron.
Blade Squadron, that was it. Yeah, that's immediately what I thought about. Where it's like the first part was EU, and the rest of it was like canon.
Yeah, the first story was firmly EU. They said going forward, these will be canon stories for the current Lucasfilm brand, and then they the sequel stories ended up going to like the Rogue One planet. So it became extremely twisted because it's like, well, where's the cutoff point for these stories? Because these characters started here, but then these stories lead here, and these are definitely canon. So it becomes kind of messy with those ones. Yeah, that's interesting.
Like Tales from Squid Lake, similar to that. I guess that wouldn't really be a benefit to us because it wouldn't truly be EU. It would be more ambiguous, but
yeah.
This is the thing, right? Like, I don't think the mainstream fan needs additional content, right? They're excited because they're happy to be milked by the corporate Star Wars to get the deluxe edition painted book to stick on that they're not going to read because they just know this is from one of the 6 movies that they think constitutes 100% of Star Wars. They don't even know what the EU is. This isn't an EU book. It's not even novels. It's just what. So yeah, it's like the only people that would appeal to are us. And again, they don't want to give us more EU right now. So I mean, I just don't think it's realistic,
Yeah.
That's why I'm not super butthurt about it. I just think it is what it is. It's going to be a pretty looking book with some.
Anyone here going to pick it up?
I'm going to buy it. I haven't bought it yet, but I'm going to pre-order it. Yeah.
I'm not against buying it. I just when you have so many copies, like the paperback, the hardcover, the Sci-Fi Book Club version, the Books a Million 2018 omnibus version, is like, do you need another one? Like, I'm not opposed to it, but does it make sense? I'm not sure.
Before reading the annotations, I didn't read them all, but I read some of the preview ones. I was firmly like 60 is too much. After reading it, I was like, I can see myself getting this, but it's still a little steep.
I mentioned earlier, Brendan, like, dude, I'm firmly getting that.
Yeah.
But the annotations are too good, dude. I remember.
I think I'm starting to be swayed. I might have to pick this up.
I first saw it come across me like on Instagram, and I was like, damn, like annotations, it's worth $60 to me. I don't know, like anything from Star Wars Brain, I think it's worth it.
If it comes out, the annotations are really good, and we'll know that right away. By the time the first person gets it and sees the content, we'll know whether to get it or not.
But by then, will it be too late since it's it's limited?
Will it be sold out? Will it be a collector's item?
When Chris mentioned the ELCs earlier, not the ELCs, the Inkstone ELCs, the Inkstone ones are pretty expensive on the secondary market. I was looking the other day out of curiosity, and they were like $200, $300 a piece. So they're like, what, 3-4 times more valuable on the secondary market for those Inkstone releases.
Darth Plagueis sold out really quickly.
Yeah.
I didn't even have time to like check my email to like go through it because I think it went straight to junk, But by the time I actually went around to try to order one, it was sold out.
I only got Dawn of the Jedi and Kenobi, and I'm wishing I'd gotten some of the others like Death Troopers. Man, because they all are really nice. It would be nice to have a full set, but they are expensive off jump, but then secondary market becomes a bit unmanageable for someone like me currently, when it's getting that expensive for just one edition of a book I already have.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm in a weird position because I have not been collecting the ELCs or the Inkstones. That my completism, I think, has sort of stopped sort of post 2014. But that's what's fascinating. I mean, there's something about the Stover book I'm drawn to, and I guess it's just because it's just that special of a book. I would, if they did this for Plagueis and a few others, I think I'd be pretty reflexively, yeah, I'm all in. Now, if they did this for like Rogue Planet, I'd scratch my head a bit, right? Then again, maybe the annotations there would be even more in the weeds EU. I mean, I have to say, I wanted to wait to see the few annotations that they have released. And while like a couple were cool, I think there's like only a couple, right? And again, the one to Shadows, I thought that was nice, right? Because my biggest fear is, were they going to force him to sort of just try and connect it to like modern new canon stuff, right? My only disappointment is that several of the others just seem to me more about like he's telling you how he wrote it and why. So it's just the author's annotations about how to read this book better, right? That didn't super excite me. Again, I know what I thought about it when I read it, right? I don't need him to hold my hand, but again, for me, it was kind of a mixed bag, but there was nothing in there that was offensive. And I thought, okay, so it's worth a try.
One of the ones that I really liked was, I'm an aspiring writer. That'll probably not work out, but I love to write. I've been writing since I was like 6, 7. I would staple together printer paper and write stories in crayons while all my friends were drawing. I've just always enjoyed like trying to tell a story. But so seeing some of the literary elements that he's calling out, the literary symbolism, it was pretty cool to see him pointing them out. and pointing out why he was doing certain things and how he was doing certain things to evoke certain emotions. It's pretty cool. And so, some of that might be valuable.
And admittedly, if he was just writing nonsense, it would be interesting, because I guess I like Stover that much, right? And I'm sure a lot of people do. So no, it's not a bad one for them to start on. And again, I think once again we found ourselves in a position, and I'm just speaking now strategically as like a fan sort of interested in one day seeing more new EU content. We're once again faced with this post 2014 sort of conundrum of, well, gosh, like you said, Scott, I already own like more copies of this than I can count different editions. Do I need another one? But then it's like, if we don't buy it, well, then we're certainly not going to get a Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones version, right? We're certainly not going to get Dark Force Rising, like they promised us 15 years ago. So
I feel like there's not enough hype for it.
When's the next anniversary for Dark Rising? Will it be like 40 years at some point soon? Or is that already passed?
2032, probably, right?
2030.
Let's do
Chris Nelson. I gotta say one thing too. And I it probably just sounds like an example. It probably wasn't meant to be taken literally, but when you mentioned Rogue Planet, I was gonna say it's kind of like impossible since Great Bear passed. But if you're just meaning that as like an example, then I don't know.
Well, yeah, just as an example, I mean, it could be Approaching Storm or something like that. But
yeah,
there's something just rubs me the wrong way about issuing book 3 first when we don't know episode 1 or episode 2 are going to get the same treatment. It's like, what if they did this with Last Command instead of Heir to the Empire, and just did that out of nowhere?
Return of the Jedi instead of the other 2.
Yeah, it's like, did I miss something? Why do they start here? So it was just a little strange to me that they do it, but it makes sense that they're promoting episode 3 with Celebration, and it's coming around the same time.
Yeah, I don't think I wouldn't even call it cynicism. It's just, look, it's just a PR opportunity. It's synergy, right? But that said, you do wonder, is there like some weird set of dice in the Del Rey offices that they use to like come up with the ELC titles for each wave that they rolled in this case too, just to say, I guess it came up episode 3. Sorry, guys. That's what I mean. That's what our lotto balls.
It's not like what that one stream Matt and Dylan did. That's exactly how they do it.
It is the best novelization. It is the best.
Although Stover thinks it's Return to the Jedi. He thinks that's the best novelization.
Yeah, I'm so baffled by, if they're doing this now, why didn't last year they do 25-year Phantom Menace with annotations by Terry Brooks? That's
you have to start somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's my point. I mean, look, 11 years ago they ended everything, which was a really weird move, right? So I guess like in the spectrum of stupid things they've done, this is like closer to like righting the ship, right? So
yeah.
By the way,
pretty excited.
By the way, just to correct the record, because I see there's speaking of 11 years old, there's an 11-year-old inside joke here about Crystal Star and Matthew Wilson from Geeks Attic. I own more copies of the Crystal Star than probably anyone, so I just want to set the record straight. So
how many do you
own? Yeah, even misprinted versions of it too.
Well, Scott has those now.
And the Amazon misprint.
I have 2 misprints and I have 2 uncorrected proofs. Yes. 2 copies of the uncorrected proofs.
I have all of the above, foreign editions, error editions, but then I also have the artist proof copy of the cover that's signed by Vonda McIntyre. That Vonda McIntyre owned. So I think on top of it, I think, yeah. Oh, I also own the cover art, like the real cover art. But
Chris,
I just wanted to throw that out.
Do you own a poster of Walroo?
No.
Man,
you own the Lego set of Waru?
Oh, here, let me blow Brady up for this.
Wait, right here.
It's an Aldi exclusive.
That's really cool.
Look at that. It's glorious.
Lego
you can even make Luke swim in there, right?
Oh, yeah. Got to pull his legs off.
So I think overall, the Revenge of the Sith, this annotated edition, good news. I would like to know more. I would like to know the rationale behind it.
I'd say my overall thoughts are mixed. Lots of positives, and then I have just a few drawbacks of my own. But, I can overlook them, I think.
And again, I'm trying to be like this voice of positivity, but I think all that is super reasonable, and I think it's interesting. I feel like there's a couple different segments of the fandom that probably have radically different sort of perspectives. We're probably the only ones who are just like kind of like struggling with ourselves, right? You know, it's like the devil on our shoulder, the angel. They're like, "Buy it, support the EU." It's Matthew Stover. The other one's like, "No, this is just wrong. We're just getting it's just more corporate milking by this brand that's disregarded us for 11 years." Meanwhile, though, I think the way this was marketed as just a mainstream Star Wars product for modern fans just to buy and file away. So they're just excited about, because again, it's just riding the train of super duper deluxe editions of books and stuff. And again, I think this is part of why I think it's so interesting to compare it to Inkstone, is that this is happening in the music industry too, where when you think of like legacy acts, legacy rock and roll acts from the 70s and stuff like that, there's a lot. It's analogous now to where the EU is. It's this old dead thing from the perspective of the IP corporate holders, and it's like Universal isn't releasing like tons of box sets from old bands anymore. They're giving the license away to boutique publishers to print like 500 vinyl copies for Record Store Day.
Yeah,
That's how those old fans are being serviced. And I think it's so interesting that after all these years of us asking for more new content, after about order of magnitude 10 years, they finally said, well, we're not going to do anything, but we're going to let boutique publisher Inkstone come up with some pretty looking versions of books, right? And we know they're going to sell. There's going to be a limited number. There's a lot of fear of missing out. They're objectively good looking things too, but odd decisions. Again, Dawn of the Jedi, what a weird one to do of all the ones, right? And I just think
my least favorite EU book, and I own the Inkstone copy of that one. I was like, why am I buying my least favorite EU book in a special edition? But then
it's a conversation starter.
Yeah, I got Kenobi, so that's one of my favorites. So I guess I evened out there.
Brennan.
I know there's good reasons to get it, but again, it's interesting. I just see this as just kind of part of a similar thing where it's like I don't think there's any like master plan or design. It's not meant. I don't think they think of us, and I don't think the mainstream doesn't need any extra reason except that it's just part of this trend, right? It's like. And in a weird way, it's not. It almost feels like it's not even Del Rey making this big strategic sort of gamble. It just almost feels like a kind of a boutique-y special limited edition thing, right? And it's pre-order too, which is probably going to help them cover their nut, right, in terms of like what it costs. So it's just like it's such a safe thing. Again, I think it's I almost think of it like an Inkstone in that way, you know.
Yeah. I think they would have had to give at least some thought to what they did with Heir to the Empire. So I don't think that they have us out of their mind completely, but you're right. There's zero risk involved because it's all pre-ordered. And oh, look, I have a second version of me there. Brady.
By the way, Scott, really quickly, you mentioned that you've got a lot of editions of this, right? And I'm trying to think just off the top of my head how many I've got, but I'm wondering of the prequels, which one has the fewest? I mean, I think it might be Attack of the Clones. I mean, obviously, the Phantom Menace has got a ton. I mean, the main hardcover, the main adult has like multiple covers and stuff. But you make a good point about the fact that like Revenge of the Sith is going to be part of these like it's like bundled in with like the Dark Lord of the Rise trilogy and stuff like that.
Phantom had the 3D paperback reissue as well, so I
the short story in it.
I definitely think Attack of the Clones is by far the least printed.
I think it just has 2 covers, right?
It has 2 covers, and I think that's the same as Revenge of the Sith, because Revenge of the Sith has the original cover, and then it has the 3-in-1 with Dark Lord, Rise of Darth Vader, and Labyrinth of Evil.
And then there's all the
in addition to the the paperback, and then
there are 3 editions of the hardcover Attack of the Clones, though.
Okay, so then maybe
There's
Revenge
2.
of the Sith has one less then.
Yeah,
okay, but it's going to be part of the omnibuses, though, right? So it's going to get more that way. Like you're going to be able to buy it alongside,
right?
Maybe,
but they're all they're all in the omnibus, like the
not the prequel, not the prequel omnibus, but the Dark Lord trilogy, right?
Oh yeah, but I counted that as that's technically the second one. Okay. So it may still have one less. If there's 3 of Attack of the Clones, then there's still one less of Revenge.
Yeah, only good games, and I forget the number, but there's like a really weird edition. It's like a slip case with like a Clone Trooper on it, and it's like I think it was only available at Suncoast, if anyone remembers that video store. But
Brennan,
Yeah.
I was trying to mention to you when when Chris Nelson had made a point about the music industry, because it reminded me of something that kind of like the same thing. Do you remember when they re-released like it was like a vinyl for like Food for MF Doom, and they did one for They did one from Doomsday a few months ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's kind of like the exact same thing, where like their kind of whole selling point beyond just having like a new glossy little cover is that it has like 10 minutes of DeMille's like actual like voice, like just him talking on the interview.
Yeah, I was going to mention that in this era, which is kind of the digital era, to entice physical collectors to buy stuff that's free online, especially in regards to music, for a lot of the rap or hip hop albums that I like to listen to, the physical edition will include like a bonus track or a bonus song or just like some extra instrumentals, because they're wanting to do anything they can do to entice you to get it in physical, because you already have it for free. So it's kind of the similar thing to what they're doing with Revenge of the Sith. I think bonus songs equating to annotations lines up pretty well.
At least that's why I said like nice. the interview, not like bonus tracks exactly, but at least like MF Doom interviews. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna lie to you, dude. I think that's just kind of outrageous, because those original. I mean, actually, the original vinyls cost a lot more, but it's just kind of like you still are paying $70 for like 10 minutes of like
extremely expensive.
Like 10 minutes worth of MF Doom on an interview from like 2004 for fucking $70. You know, it's kind of, I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. And yet they know that some of us will do it, which is why they do it. And that is a similar thing to what's going on here. I always wondered if the ELCs would reprint the prequel novelizations.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like they will.
I think from day one, I've always said if they had any balls that they should, and to make it clear that they're EU books. But I think they'll be the last ones to do. And I think it's not surprising that we're getting this thing before we get an ELC version, because again, this is just something that doesn't confuse the mainstream. This just looks like, again, it's just one of their movies. That's all they know about this, right? And it's just a book of the movie. But I do think that like it would be disingenuous to have an Essential Legends collection, not have the prequels, but we'll see. But at this point, it does feel like they're going to print everything, although NJO has obviously been sort of woefully looked over. But
I'm very curious if they'll reprint everything. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. They've just done Razor's Edge and Honor Among Thieves, so they've gone to the last ones that were released. So those are in the upcoming waves. So I mean, I don't know. Are they gonna fill in all the gaps? Maybe.
I mean, who knows? I'd want to know. I want to know what edition of the dictionary they have and how it defines essential. I'm getting really increasingly confused by what they mean by that. But
definitely,
I think that's a whole nother discussion about what they do for the Essential Legends collections and why and what's next. But
yeah,
I don't really think they're gonna print a lot of post Jedi stuff. And the reason why is because they probably don't want people thinking, oh, this is better than our sequels. I honestly feel like that. That's why, because I mean, it's ironic because they barely print anything in there. The Thrawn trilogy and Jedi, is that it? Maybe a couple of others.
They glossed over Jedi Academy trilogy so far. They did X-Wing, I guess, as well.
Yeah, they haven't completed it yet, right? But
they did Courtship, but not Truce.
And again, in fairness, right? Like post Jedi, we're talking about everything's a maxi series. So it's, I mean, I understand if they're doing it 3x3x3 in all these ways, they're gonna have to think about how to roll that out. But
a wave per trilogy for some of those Bantam ones would be what it would be, right? A Black Fleet wave, a Corellian trilogy wave, AC Crispin Han Solo wave. You know, I don't know. Is that the way they're gonna do it?
Well, the reason I think they're going to do it eventually and just republish the entire thing, unless in the meantime they come up with another way to republish ones they've already republished and start the cycle over again, is because, again, this is very boring, but it's like this is just all part of the long-term process of getting rid of the mass market paperback versions, right? They don't ever want to sell you NJO in that size. So I think eventually, if they want to cash in on that, yes, we'll get an Essential Legends version.
Yeah. I like this idea. NJO collector's box with the Japanese covers. How much would that cost? $1,000?
We could dream. I would pay any amount for that,
Yeah.
and I'm sure a lot of people would. But
You know what? Again, here's if I had my magic wand, what I would suggest is they just stop the ELC altogether. And again, they've sowed confusion into the very nature of the English language with their weird definition of the word essential. And I would just have something called like the chronological series. Just put it all out in chronological reading order.
New covers?
Just reboot it. What's that?
New covers, new format, all of that.
Oh God, no! Keep those people away from new covers. Do it. If there's going to be government, it should only do one thing. It should keep Del Rey away from hiring artists to redo those covers. Abominations.
I think one thing that would be cool is if they did do like the chronological read through edition. One thing that would be cool is if they could incorporate young readers novels into that. In like maybe omnibuses, combine Jedi Apprentice into like 4 or 5. This is getting into dream territory again.
Yeah.
But it would be cool if they had something along the spine. Like, a lot of luxurious editions have stuff going across the spine that's all consistent. That would be really nice on the shelf.
This is going back maybe 30 years, maybe more, right? But there were these like home video, like VHS releases of Indiana Jones, the movies. Mm-hmm. And they said things on the spine like number 36. And people were like, what? Where'd that come from? And the reason is because they included in their accounting all of like the young indie stuff and readers, and so it was like, wow, like, it was someone really thinking about where this. So yeah, like you could totally imagine that as long as we're thinking big picture. But I think about this is like in the academic press world, there's always these two ways you can go that I've seen university publishers do, and one of them gets it right, one of them gets it wrong when they want to republish the entire work of like a dead thinker or something, right? Sometimes they break it up thematically, kind of like doing with ELC. They'll be like, oh, here's the person's sort of thoughts on philosophy. Oh, here were their like all their op-eds. Where they get it right is where they just say, here's everything the guy ever wrote, and we're going to put it out in, again, the order in which he published it. When they do that, that person becomes a new cottage industry that people write dissertations around. When they do the thematic thing, people get lost. So right now, the ELC, it's giving people headaches trying to get into this. Definitely. Right? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The next thing that we had to talk about for the stream today was the release of some new EU recently. This was Abel G. Pena's short story Vader's Legacy, which is, I think, long been sort of sought after by people. And the sequel story, which I didn't know existed, which was called Faith Reborn, A Sith Destiny. And this was a sequel story where it was fleshing out elements of Vader's legacy and just expanding on them a little bit. I believe Vader's Legacy was intended for Insider, but then it was intended for hyperspace. And I believe Faith Reborn was probably only intended for hyperspace. They didn't see fruition, sadly, but we have them now. And I thought they were absolutely excellent. Did anyone get a chance to look at them yet?
I saw them briefly on Reddit, and I believe it was intended to be released on Reddit, but I think the Maw installation moderators took it down, unfortunately. So I don't know how this is going to be finalized, released. I think Joe's group had got it from Abel Pena, and that's how it was released. But it's also possible. I know it was supposed to be an Insider in hyperspace, but I think it was also supposed to be on the Star Wars blogs too, right?
Oh,
2015 when they
were
going to post certain EU content that they had permission for that stopped in like spring of 2015. I think they put the stops on that. So
for people who are looking for it, if the comments are deleted or whatever on Reddit where the posts were originally shared, I have the links embedded in my YouTube videos about them description. So if you go there, you can click over to them. That's the way I found them earlier today. So
right, and I would just say read what was posted on Reddit by Joe's group, because that's how they intended to release it. So it was their decision to give this to us. So give them credit and just kind of see what they say about it.
Yeah, and we're pretty glad to have them. I thought they were great. One thing that I thought was done incredibly well was Abel's handling of Lumaya. I thought he did an excellent job in handling her character, and additionally in sort of walking on eggshells around Vergier and the controversy of her in-universe character. He does an excellent job of just adding to the mystique and kind of supporting kind of both points of view a little bit, but never being definitive. And I thought he walked a really tough line there, and he did it exceptionally. I was very impressed by the sequel story. I thought it's much better than Vader's Legacy. Not that anything's wrong with Vader's Legacy, but I thought Faith Reborn was fantastic. They're both very good reads. It'll take you like an hour and a half to read them both. I'd say they're well worth anyone's time. That basically it connects the Marvel comics to Legacy of the Force and explains what Lumaya is doing for all that time. It explains how she's kind of working in the background of all of these Darksiders that pop up over the years in other EU material. And then it also explores a lot of Vader's apprentices, because Vader ended up having a lot of them. I was glad to see some Force Unleashed love in there, because I grew up on Force Unleashed. I was glad to see some Star Wars manga love in there. I believe the Star Wars manga stories are canon, and Abel G. Pena certainly treated them as such by incorporating the character Tau, who was from Evil Eyes in manga Silver and Black. So there's some really cool deep cut stuff in there. There's some retcons of contradictions in there. These are essential. Hey, Essential Legends Collection, reprint these, because these feel essential to me. They feel necessary, and I'm very glad we got them. I just love them.
Wait, hold on, Brennan. You said he explicitly references Tau?
Yes, explicitly as one of Vader's apprentices. He even uses the character. He even uses the character for another person's story, another person's biography as well.
That's really interesting, because I think the first time, at least my memory of Pena, like referenced the manga, was in his General Grievous article, Lord of War.
That's right.
Because he recounts like the manga where it's like Grievous find the two Night Sisters.
Yes.
But like
that's
it's
right.
like it's like a loose implication. Like he doesn't like explicitly say like, you know, what he did on that planet, but he does say he went to that same planet.
Yeah, and Jason Fry also kind of treated the mangas as canon, while he did kind of say, hey, I'm not saying anything for sure, it's fuzzy. He did include a lot of the planets that were in the mangas in the Essential Atlas material. So definitely seems like some people were treating them as canonical material at Lucasfilm back in the day. And so I kind of go with that. I'm a maximalist with continuity.
Were the mangas officially released by like Lucasfilm commissioned? Okay.
Yeah, they were loaned out to, was it Tokyo Pop or something like that was the company. Okay. And they were released in Japan in Japanese, and they were released in the UK only, I think, for English translations. Okay. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, the Force Unleashed reference I thought was really great too, and I think it's ironic because I'm sure some people have seen this, that Joe recently took Force Unleashed once again out of his timeline on his website. Yeah. For a long time it was out. He stuck it in. Now he's taking it out. I wonder what he thinks about this in light of this piece, but
it'll probably go back up.
We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the big reason? Is it the Bail Organa plot line?
That's where a lot of the Force Unleashed isn't canon stuff stems from. I think it can be. I think we could finagle a way around it. Abel certainly could.
Yeah,
it just doesn't make sense to me, because I mean he has TCW like just detailed on there everywhere, and it's like, oh, you'll keep that, but even though that has more contradictions and doesn't fit at all with the movies. But
doesn't he have Star Wars Rebels on there?
I mean, a literal sense. I think the EU story that's like a video game story. I think me and Brennan spoke about this once, but like Elite Squadron, what Battlefront 3 is going to be based upon. I think that's more egregious when it comes to this continuity errors, because Brennan, do you remember the time I told you we're in the Death Star trench run?
Yeah.
It's like instead of Han showing up, they make it so that is X2 that saves Luke. Like they literally rewrite a scene from the movie, but like the Wikipedia treats the game as canon.
Yeah. I mean, it's treated as canonical example of Ram Koda surviving past Return of the Jedi. Yeah, it's interesting.
By the way, I didn't want to start a conversation about Joe. I know people have different feelings here. Lance, you've obviously got a lot of biases about this. I didn't want to open up a can of worms, but I would just say, I think in Joe's case, I don't want to speak for him. I think he wrote about this on the website. I think when it comes to Force Unleashed, and you could say this about lots of elements of various bits of EU, including elements of the Clone Wars we don't like, but I think in his case, I think part of the issue isn't just the story lore continuity challenges. It's it's just what we know about the real world in terms of some of the licensing process at the time. But there's just elements of the Force Unleashed game we know weren't necessarily seen with the finest tooth comb, like by George and at various elements. I mean, just parts of the licensing were sort of different there, which is why some of the story elements did their best to take the lore to the breaking point, right? So I think that's partially what he's pulling in, right? A little bit. We know a little bit too much about how the game was constructed. And why some of those sort of story beats go a little too far.
Is it the game specifically and not the novels? Because it's pretty established. Like if you look at the inside flap of the timelines by Del Rey, you can see the Force Unleashed 1 and 2 are definitely part of that, and they have established eras, that they're supposed to take place
or in the Dark Horse comics timelines as well.
So the biggest problem I think was that conflict that it had with Interlude at Darknell, where Garmbella Bliss is on the Death Star, and he, I guess, forgets he was captive on the Death Star. Maybe he got hit in the head or something. It's nothing that they couldn't write away with a retcon of some sort.
Oh, definitely. And Abel shows that by Vader's Legacy that just came out, had some retcons in there that smooth things over pretty easily.
And then the other thing is the Executor's online before it technically should be, which I think was in the newspaper strips. But you could say it was just a prototype, or it was stagnant or something, that it wasn't really fully online. It wasn't
These
capable.
are really easy fixes.
Yeah.
I think they're just sentences.
Wasn't the Bail Organa storyline something from George? Like I remember seeing it.
I heard that in the interview with Hayden Blackman.
He said that George gave us specific details on the story we can tell about Bail Organa, which is
Bail
a whole
and Leia, yeah.
Oh yeah.
To my knowledge, I think that's from the radio drama. At least because that's where the whole I think that's the contradiction where like it stems from the radio drama.
Right. Okay. With the Bail Organa stuff.
Yeah, like him being within the Imperial Senate, and it's like he was just kind of like a spy. It's like it wasn't public that he was like a rebel, but Force Unleashed makes it clear that like he's an established like a rebel. Like the Empire knows that he's like phony.
Unless Palpatine tried not to have him killed because he knew it would bring out a whole, like he'd be made a martyr.
Yeah,
you could use that as an explanation.
One sentence retcons.
Yeah,
but
I thought in the radio drama it was pretty clear he was a suspected rebel. Maybe it wasn't. Lord Tyon didn't come in there saying, "I know you're a rebel," but it was kind of suspected behind the scenes.
I mean, even in that case, it's like he's like suspected. Like they don't know for certain.
But he's not a wanted terrorist, to use Joe's words. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but in Force Unleashed, it's like they are very much certain that the guy's with the rebels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least Palpatine is.
Maybe it's all just Comp Nor propaganda.
I mean, who knows? And Brent, I was gonna mention to you that it's interesting you brought up the Force Unleashed comment, because I was gonna say that all the different mediums between Force Unleashed, like the DS game, the Wii game, the comic, the novel, the 360, PlayStation 3 games, like they all have roughly the same story, but they all kind of like depict events completely differently to one another.
There's discrepancies for sure between them.
Like Shock T's death is like articulated on how it happens completely separately, and at least between the comic, the game, and the novel.
Yeah. There's a lot of different depictions of that. I just chalked it up to in-game stuff is for the user playthrough experience, and roughly does the events.
It's the same for Dark Force.
I'm not talking like the playable stuff. I'm talking about like the cutscenes. Like
the
actual static stuff. Because when it's like game mechanics, there's too much of a vague area to even talk about. For
sure. Then the cutscenes do feel more. I don't know. Something about the cutscenes just feels more solid, like a film.
Right. It's static.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For sure. The next thing we had to talk about on my list for today is the Screenrant Legends continuation article. Came out a couple weeks ago. This is maybe starting to be old news, but I figured we'd talk about it. Thoughts? Anyone?
It was great.
Yep.
Yeah, basically that.
So home run.
Finally, there is a mainstream, organization talking about this. Now, too bad the article did not get a whole lot of traction besides us. But it's Screenrant. I mean, come on, dude. and they're writing an article about exactly what we are asking
I
for.
know.
It's perfect.
I'm not.
When I read that, it blew my mind.
Yeah, it was mind blowing. I'm not sure, by the way, what measures were used to determine traction. I mean, I think what's sort of interesting is the fact that a site like Screenrant is writing this means traction is worked. I mean,
That's true.
Like it's there. It's already there, right?
I guess what I meant was like more so like people like the mainstream fan talking about it. But I mean, you're right. The fact that Screen Rant is even making an article about it means that there's traction.
And it certainly reached eyes that aren't within our immediate, like, sort of EU echo chamber. It definitely reached some eyes.
Yeah, some people.
Yeah,
right. And I think the fact is, like, and the reason why people write articles like this, the reason why, you know, we for years have tried, at least for those of us in our fandom who still believe in continuation, which is a smaller number of people, just looking at folks in the chat. You know, it's like the reason why we want to make arguments like this is that when someone who actually matters, who's in an influence making position at a licensee, even at Lucasfilm, Googles these things like, hey, what's up with people who still like Legends? They'll see stuff like this now, right? They don't even need to read the article. They just need to know that Screen Rant is writing articles like this with headlines like that send in a message. There was an article I think they wrote today about how valuable Legends is for helping to recontextualize Revenge of the Sith. Again, maybe cynically part of us coordinated sort of like plan.
Make us buy the annotated edition.
Yeah, right. But it's like, but the article, what's nice about it is it gets it right. And the thing is, what's to me was so critically important about that first Screenrant article, and then the one I read today, is that they get the basics of our whole sort of worldview right. They don't just say, hey, you know what? Shoot, I've got a deadline. My editor wants some more clickbait pop culture crap. Let me just like go grab a Legends book off the shelf and write some stuff. Let me listen to an EU video I saw 3 years ago and just rip them off. No, it's people who fundamentally start from the right premise, like that article did. It didn't just say, hey, it'd be cool if this came back or if we saw some ideas incorporated into the new canon. It said, 11 years ago, a terrible thing happened. There was a fork in the road. One continuity ended and another one started. Lucasfilm, you look like clowns for not continuing one alongside the other. What's critically important about that is for years, there have been various articles here and there that, again, talk about, oh, we miss the old EU, or it would be cool to see some elements return. It's as if the person who wrote that has actually been watching our stuff. That's the argument that we originated, right? Lucasfilm never wanted you to think that there were two canons. It was our fandom that invented that notion. And now finally, it took 10 years, but now the mainstream has internalized it, right? And again, ironically, at a point when the EU fandom is in kind of a weird place. It's very confused about what it is, what it wants. You know, do we want continuation? You know, the entire fandom's been taken over by just wacko grifters, you know, throughout YouTube, who bounce up and down to get excited and talk about alpha patriotism and stuff, and have completely convinced EU fans that you're supposed to take a toxic, aggressive, anti-Lucasfilm point of view by virtue of being an EU fan. While all this nonsense is happening in this little fandom, the mainstream of Star Wars, guess where they're at? EU is awesome. Bring it back. Lucasfilm, you look like clowns for not wanting to, right? So it's so hilarious. I can't wait to be a mainstream Star Wars fan now for the first time in 11 years, you know? And for the naysayers who think that like it's not worth the risk because woke, blah, 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 you're idiots. The mainstream has now lapped you guys as the EU fans who ironically years ago were the ones making the arguments that are now internalized in this piece. When I think about the last 10 years, and I say this as an old timer, when I think about who's kind of taken a lot of steps back, when I think about what we've achieved in 10, 11 years, you could get very cynical and say, it's over, Hollywood's broken, they don't like us, blah, blah, blah. We don't have the EU yet, right? So we shouldn't like, you know, count our chickens before the eggs hatch. But when I just think of the last 10 years, the legacy is we got the mainstream to believe that there's actually two canons, right? Two continuities.
That enough is a win right there.
That let's put some brackets on this past 10 years. We did that. And that's worth a pat on the back. Now, what happens here? It's still out of our control. And the Screenrant article doesn't make anything happen. But more like that in the long run, make it a lot easier, right, for Lucasfilm at some point years from now to sort of, again, Google and be like, my gosh, even the mainstream's writing about this kind of thing. That's our legacy. And again, it's ironically happening at a point when the EU fandom is just a big mess the mainstream fandom is finally catching up to where it's a shame most of us should be, but that we certainly were for years. So it's I can't say enough good things about that article, and with that I'll finally shut up.
I've
Yeah,
always wanted continue to you.
It's
That's yeah.
it's encouraging. I hope this message sticks. Like, I hope they don't forget what they wrote,
Yeah,
and they
I know.
keep this mindset going forward. And I don't so much care about if we convinced them or they got there on their own. It doesn't really matter as long as they finally got the message. Now, where it goes from here, that's what we're all curious about. And I don't think people are really going to get excited that they got the message until it translates into something. But
Yeah.
at least it's encouraging that they finally got the message. And I see Matt Wilkins. Yeah, you could say a few years ago they were saying why the expanded universe had to go. We know all that, but that doesn't matter. It's in the past. Hopefully this message is the one that they stick to going forward.
It doesn't matter where you've been, it just matters where you end up. And right now where they're ending up is more on our side, which is fantastic. When I saw the article headline, I thought that what I was about to be in for was some Disney should bring back Revan and Mara Jade into the canon,
Sure.
into the new
Right.
Disney Plus show. That's what I was expecting, because that had been the narrative. People
Yes.
had been saying that's what we wanted. And finally, as I was reading the article, I was like, oh my gosh, they're saying what we've all been saying. That's so nice. I just felt like I felt a burden like lift. Like I just felt seen for the first time. You know, it
Oh, yeah.
might be silly to say, but it just felt so gratifying.
Dude, yeah, this is some group therapy here. Listen, again, I say this as an old timer who invested, 11 good years of my life that I can't get back, that I regret in many ways, given how I've seen so many sort of institutions fall and people give up and walk away and stuff. And again, to see that, it feels redemptive. It feels like it was actually worth the going through. Now, again, I'm not arrogant enough to think that like, oh, they saw something I said at some point, 7 years ago on Twitter but the way that even the specific way they're wording how they open up these articles by sort of, again, starting from sort of like the premise that, again, this specific thing happened and the specific solution needs to take place. It's as if they heard one of us specifically say that, right? That's
Yeah.
the thing. So it really feels like it turns out all of this, this work of us, this work we've done, right, has actually kind of paid off. And that's what's so great. But I wasn't feeling great until I saw that article. And again, we still shouldn't feel great because we're still out EU.
Yeah.
But again, I think we've gotten to a point, many of us, where we've gotten too cynical or we've gotten too good at running with a certain narrative, right? Or because we enjoy watching negative narratives and stuff like this, right? But it's been so long that it might be hard for people to recognize progress when it's happened. And this is actually a sign of progress.
Huge
And
step.
it's hard to see that sometimes, but it is. And so again, I can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, you got to call the shots as you see them. Sometimes you see something bad, you have to call it out. This is something good, and I think we should recognize that. Again,
Something
it doesn't.
great.
It
Yeah.
may not translate to anything, and they may 2 months later go back to their old message. But
Yeah.
as of now, they at least got the right idea.
As of now, it's the greatest thing I've seen in a decade. Like terrific, fantastic. And I wasn't feeling the win until I actually read the article, read the wording, because I was thinking, oh, I'm in for the same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The same Mara Jade's gonna show up in the new movie type stuff.
By
That
Zendaya.
old chestnut. Yeah, I've seen
Starring
that one.
Zendaya.
Yeah. Oh man. So it just felt so good to read it. But right now I think there is actually a live stream, an official Star Wars live stream. Star Wars Celebration is happening. So does anyone have expectations for it? I think the article segues well into what I was wanting to talk about, which is, could we see new EU be announced? Obviously that's a huge thing. Would we see that? If we did see that, what would it look like in your guys' estimation? Is there an outside chance? What do you guys think?
Well, I've got it open right now. And they just announced a new Star Wars movie, and a lot of people in the comments
Is it gonna happen?
They're like, another project to not happen.
Yeah.
And it's supposed
That's where
to
it's
come out.
at. That's where the energy's at right now.
Yeah. And so I feel like if we don't get something this year, that might just be a little sliver of something. I think the next celebration, we would more than likely have at least a little sliver of something. Whether it being like, they finally get to that KOTOR remake, or Force Unleashed 3 or Battlefront 3 or something like that. I think the video games, because they're very mainstream, are highly likely to get something out of it.
Yeah. I definitely think the video games are the most likely avenue that we could get stuff first. People are still clamoring for Force Unleashed 3. Now, how are you going to make Force Unleashed 3 a part of the Disney canon timeline? That doesn't even make sense. So it definitely seems like if they are going to continue any of these video game stories, that would be new material for Legends, for the EU.
Right.
Right?
Which, for a video game player, like if you just, if you were a video game fan, you knew that the movies happened. There were the shows that happened. The Force Unleashed is something that you're like, oh, that just takes place before the Jedi, the new Jedi games coming out. And so if you're just a casual fan there, you're like, oh, hey, there are these really cool Star Wars Force games from, 20 years, almost 20 years ago now. But,
holy cow.
Yeah,
you're right.
Which is crazy. So maybe for the 20-year anniversary of The Force Unleashed, we could get something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very cynical. I'm not holding my breath for anything new EU, either this celebration or the next one. I think what needs to be done is the permissions need to be granted to the licensees. And I was very disappointed at the last Fantasy Flight live stream YouTube video that they did for Star Wars Unlimited. There had been hints going back a couple sets that Legends of the Force was going to have certain EU characters, because Legends, the moniker of the EU that they're using, that they might have things like Revan. And it got to the point where Star Wars Unlimited content creators were on their own speculating that there might be Legends content, like, oh yeah, I'd love to see Kyle Katarn. I'd love for them to use some of these Jedi that they used in the Sith Wars and the Legacy era to make cards around them. I mean, think of how cool Darth Malak would be in a special art, form. I think collectors would really like to see that, as well as the players. And the player base skews older, so a lot of them are familiar with the older games and such. So that seemed like a win-win, like a great idea for the franchise, for the game. But it seems to me that they don't have the permissions to do that. And I don't know that specifically. They haven't really spoken on it. But
so interesting to tease it and then pull it back.
Yeah, they said, well, anything's possible for the next set. And then I think it was last week when they did the intro video for the set, everybody in the comments was saying, where's Revan? Where's EU content? EU content, or I'm not buying, give us Legends. And to see that in the live stream,
at least that card communities that EU
right,
positive.
And this is like a completely different fan group. They don't read, they don't read EU novels on a regular basis. They don't watch live streams like this. These are just kind of a different sort of Star Wars
different
fan.
Circles.
But to have them asking for all this, and Fantasy Flight to not even acknowledge it, they basically ignore everything that they're asking for, is just so disappointing.
That is.
And it felt like the wind just came out of the sails for the set.
I've not particularly had interest for buying Star Wars Unlimited myself, but if as soon as you have EU characters, I would go out of my way to start buying them. It would be a huge win for them. It seems like there's demand for it within that community itself. And the fact that you tease it and then pull it back just is.
I mean, think of how many EU fans and just general MMO video game players played the Star Wars Old Republic even after the EU ended, because that was the last vestige of EU content that you could get. This would kind of be the same way if they opened up the permissions for the licensees. but they just don't have that, and they're very protective about the property. There was news from the Star Wars Legions game, which is all new canon, but it shows you where their head is. They don't want a Emperor Palpatine or an Emperor's Royal Guard miniature in that game because they're so protective over that character and how it's perceived in the game based on power levels and all that stuff. So they're micromanaging the licensing for, I think it's Atomic Mass Games or whoever has a license for the miniatures. So the permissions need to be lifted, I think, to get EU content, to get any hope of what we're asking for.
So you're saying that the mainstream like card community want more Legends, and then we have like Screenrant, which I think their main push was the comics, because Marvel has this multiverse stuff in the comics going on, like a recent run or something. And then I guess like some of the games, people in the games want like Battlefront 3, the original one. And it sounds like
you have to be clear on what you want, because there's a difference between releasing remastered old games, which is similar to what Force Unleashed 3 would be. I find it very hard that they'd create a modern game for a modern game system that is based on the characters the way Force Unleashed 2 played as a game. I just don't think they would do that. If anything, it would sort of be a remaster of the Force Unleashed 2 with a slightly different story, the same way they did Mysteries of the Sith for Dark Forces.
If they did that, that would be great. Like, give an actual ending, explain how Vader escapes the rebels.
Or they just say that the dark side ending is canonical.
And we got hints of that when they said they were going to remaster KOTOR, right? With a slightly different story angle. Maybe that would be Legends, or maybe that wouldn't be. We don't know. But the fact that they could change it in such a way that it would have new content, new story lines, that opens up the possibility that we could get something as far as new EU content. But we have to be specific on what we're asking for, and it's very easy to confuse that with just a remaster of an old game, like they're doing, Star Wars Racer on the Switch or the Switch 2. That's not necessarily what we're asking for.
No, the ports and the remasters are cool for sure, because it gets the games in modern hands. Like my little cousin has a Switch, and so he sees all these Star Wars games, and he starts telling me about Starkiller, and I was like, "You know Starkiller?" He's like, "Yeah." And so it was a very proud cousin moment.
The tragedy of Starkiller. Sorry.
It was a proud moment for me, because then he names me all the names of the Republic Commandos, and so it was very cool because he's discovering these games, and now he's reading the book, reading the comics. He's getting into it just because of these new ports, and they're cool. But I think there's definitely a distinction between these ports/remasters and what some people are asking for, which is brand new EU games finishing some of the cut off stories. Like, I know people would kill for a new Kyle Katarn game,
Sure. But this is why, by the way, just to connect this with Celebration and some of these other things, this is why there's 0% chance that there's going to be EU announcements at this Celebration, in the same way that, like, a couple of years ago with the last Celebration, there were all these announcements that were just slaps in the face, right? They said, oh, there's going to be a movie called Dawn of the Jedi and one called New Jedi Order. And it makes you think like, oh, great, the new movie's probably going to be called Shadows of the Empire or something, right? But
is that
but
2023's?
Yeah, right.
I was devastated after that one. Devastated.
A new movie called Star Wars Starfighter.
All right, I'm already bored.
After the game,
named after the video game. What? So cool.
Already coming.
But it's 100% likely that's what's happening right now in the exhibition hall. Right, are all of the people you're talking about, Brendan, are going up to Hasbro and saying, oh my gosh, I play these games. I know these characters. I don't know what the EU is, but I want to see these cool looking characters, right? I mean, you go, if you strike up any conversation in a random GameStop in North America, those people, either the customers or the people behind the desk, they don't know anything about our struggles. They weren't sad when Dark Horse lost the license.
No.
They know Starkiller. They know all the Old Republic characters. The list goes on, and
maybe even Dash Rendar and Scissor.
They might, right? Sure, exactly. And so this is why. Look, again, if we're just waving our magic wands, yes, I want Force Unleashed 3. I don't care in what medium. There's a million things on my wish list, right? But I think realistically, we're going to continue to get the licensees that do have little bits of permission, right? To your point, Scott, to propose things, you're going to see the Hasbro's and stuff continue, I think, to like spin off EU sorts of characters, right? That have a little bit of a kind of a crossover appeal. That's going to kind of have to kind of tide us over for a while. But what I liked about the Screenrant article, and Grady, I'm glad you mentioned this. We neglected to say this. The other favorite thing about that article for me was how it wasn't saying this is the only way it should continue, but it laid out one particular practical path for continuation to occur, right? To say, look, let the comics sort of do this. They did it before, they can do it again. And I sort of feel like we're at a point now for any of us who've been doing this long, since 2014, we're at a point where there's lots of people who disagree with continuation, but at least I think at this point in our fandom, they know what we mean when we say it. We couldn't have always taken that for granted. They know what we mean now when we say there should be two continuities, one of which continues along the parallel path in new canon. I think it's time to also start sort of saying, not so specific. I think we get all bogged down. People are like, no, like the next thing, it has to be this, it has to be that. We have to get KOTOR 3. I remember when Marvel 108 came out in 2019, everyone goes, well, this isn't the thing I wanted. It's like, I know, but there's going to be things we're going to get. But I think it's okay for people to start laying out like a vision for what this looks like. And Scott, you did that so well on the website that itself got decanonized recently. But I think the more we can not get super specific and just confuse people, but just say it could look like comics, it could look like a book, it could look like a collection of essays, or it could look like a card game. I think that's better, because I still think there's some people, they just cognitively, there's some block. And if we can help them understand what this actually looks like in practice, not specific titles, don't bog them down to that, but just roughly. And that's what that Screenrant article also did so well.
And I think another important point is to show the demand. We need to keep talking about this. I mean,
we need to buy the annotated Revenge of the Sith novel, maybe.
Well, ask for what you like. If it's not something that you specifically want, it's okay to show your interest in what you want to buy, and that way the licensees can hear that. I think they know that behind the scenes. It's just that the permission isn't there to grant them the ability to produce the kind of stuff that we want. But if the demand is stronger and stronger, like they can go in their negotiations with Lucasfilm to say, hey, we want this. This is going to be a point that we're not going to back down on when we renew our license, or maybe a new licensee is going to come in and say, we want to produce XYZ. We think we can make a lot of money on it. We think it'll be really successful. So the more the louder our voice is, the more they hear us, and eventually we could get what we want. Bully them into submission, right? Sort of get what we want, and don't do it in a militant way. You don't have to tear them down, although that is a possibility. But just voice your opinion, I guess.
Based on how well 108 sold, I'm sure that Marvel and some of those writers wanted to do 109 and 110, and just keep doing that. I'm sure they did.
I know it
did really well.
Just to so this is totally clear for the record for posterity. The editors at Marvel wanted to completely reinstitute the line, and all they got was 108 under the cover of an anniversary, right? So just so people know, Marvel wanted it, and they kept asking, and they finally relented. And again, just so this is clear for posterity's sake, Lucasfilm only relented by saying you can do it, but we will provide zero marketing. I want people to understand that's how little at the time they cared about it, right? Which is why it's all the more remarkable that now Screenrant, the mainstream source, is saying, actually, again, Lucasfilm, you're clowns for having treated us so badly, right? So
absolutely.
Matt Martin said he did a ton of marketing for it on Twitter.
You know who did marketing for it? Do you know who did 100% of the marketing?
Who?
Basically, people on this stream. We were the marketing team. Yeah.
You guys made me buy it.
Really interesting about it is, I wouldn't have heard about it without the YouTubers, and I went out and got it from my comic shop. I just went to the comic shop to buy that because I'd heard about it. I remember seeing it on shelves. I remember it selling out at my local comic shops, Benny's Comics and Cards, Bell Comics and Cards. I saw people buying them in addition to myself. I never got to see any of the alt covers in the stores.
When is Marvel's 85th anniversary. Was that last year?
Well, 2018 was the 80th, right? So
Oh, okay.
it's
I was like,
past.
maybe.
90s coming up again.
Hey,
don't know.
I mean,
I would kill
really
for 109 and 110. I would love more of those stories. Absolutely.
Well,
Give
sure.
me more of those.
I really thought, naively, obviously in retrospect, that in 2021, with the anniversary of Heir to the Empire, that we were gonna see some opportunity, some cover for Lucasfilm to say, sure, Del Rey, let's do another annotated or another additional short story or something, right? It's like, and instead, no, they just ran with reprinting them Heir to the Empire again, right? But I think like looking down the road at anniversaries is going to be, that's going to provide Lucasfilm the ultimate cover to sort of, like finally save face, right? It's almost like at this point they need a made up reason to stop looking like the clowns that now even the mainstream is calling them out for. I guess what's again, I just want to really make this point clear. We're sort of not alone anymore. We're this tiny little fandom within the larger Star Wars fandom, and all the drama we've dealt with for years internally and stuff like that. Like the actual counter movement inside the own EU fandom to critique people who are pro continuation, right? I mean, the multi sort of front wars we've had to sort of fight. What's so interesting is, and again, even in 2019, there were just some random YouTubers and folks on Twitter and stuff like doing 100% of the marketing. Why do I say that? Because again, it was a fact. Lucasfilm said we were not going to promote this. But the thing is, this is how things have changed. I don't say this to say, aren't we great? And doesn't it suck to be us still? It's like, we're not alone. When this celebration inevitably says nothing more about more new EU, there will be a Screenrant article saying, you guys missed a chance to announce more EU.
I hope
what
so.
are you waiting for, right? So we've got other people on our side
We've
now.
got a movie based on this game, apparently.
the,
Based
Yeah.
solely on this. I'm sure.
They're running out of names with Starfighter and with a Crimson Dawn and Hidden Empire. They're running out of like trademarkable Star Wars names, right? At this point, because everything.
There's going to be a new Last Jedi title sometime down the road. Just how many ofs or thes are in the title?
The Last Jedi 2.
Yeah.
Well, and there was talk, right, that Force Awakens was going to be called Force Unleashed at one point in the production process. That was on the table.
That's crazy.
Speaking of, you really, this is going back a couple of threads. Scott, you mentioned Mysteries of the Sith, which was a good example in the context we were discussing. But I just wanted to plug the Re-Expanded project, which actually has a Mysteries of the Sith novelization, which is so cool. I'd love to see more novelizations of games. Holy cow! And I know there's a KOTOR 1 and KOTOR 2 as well as part of that whole initiative. But
it's amazing. I love it.
I would love novelizations of the SWTOR storylines.
That would
be really cool.
That would actually be, I think, more appropriate because we have so many, like, who is the Jedi Knight from the Jedi Knight class? Exactly. Like, we don't know who that is. We don't know who the Outlander is towards, what was the Eternal Empire stuff. We don't know who that character is. Because if you don't know how the games work, there's, 8 storylines?
Yep.
And
are they classes,
there's
right?
8 classes, yeah. And then when you get to the Eternal Empire stuff, no matter what your class is or what character you've made, you all kind of go on the same story, starting with the Eternal Empire, and you're still playing the character you created, but in universe you're playing a different character, if that makes sense. The Outlander is completely separate than all the others. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around if you haven't played the game, but
Lance,
I think that game needs novelizations. What's up?
Definitely to firmly establish canonicity.
I was just gonna ask Lance, like, who is the hero of Tython then?
The hero of Tython is the Jedi Knight class. That's the Jedi Knight story. That's who that is.
Oh.
Now, I think the Outlander is the hero of Tython. That's what I personally believe. I think that would make the most sense, but it's never been confirmed. It's always been a mystery.
We need
I think the way to go.
Star Wars Galaxies. That's what we need.
Yeah, I think the way to go is to tackle the stuff that's easiest first, like Mysteries of the Sith, the games that don't have any proper novelization, and then you can get into the MMOs, the Star Wars Galaxies. I mean, how long would that take with all the special events that they've done over the years?
Ruins of Dance
I don't.
Part 2.
Yeah, there's
Yes,
just so much involved in that. I don't think you could just go back in time to document that. Does anybody even have the ability to play some of the events that were in those servers?
I think all that's left of some of that is whatever's on Wikipedia. Like, might actually be some of the last of it. So make entire novels based on Wikipedia stubs about the game, like it would be interesting. I'll give it that. You know, but same as that Clone Wars Adventures game. I heard there was a lot of lore in there that just got lost to time.
I don't know. Most Star Wars YouTubers these days just use Wikipedia for their content, Brennan. So I'm sure that content creator.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
it's a free script, Chris. It's a free script, Chris, which means free money. So I mean,
yeah. Oh, I get it.
That's what they do. Yeah. In regards to one of the last things we have on here is in regards to the toys, which while the publishing media has really failed us for Legends for like a decade, I've thought the toys have done a really good job overall. All these Black Series figures up here that are only EU characters, and I don't even have them all. All these Funko Pops, for the people who are interested in this, they're getting their EU characters, which is really cool. Sometimes with new art for the characters on the boxes, on the packaging.
Sometimes with the wrong names.
Sometimes with the wrong names. Yeah, exactly. We've got
Carcanos
up here. Yeah. There doesn't seem to be a drop off in these. We're still getting these pretty steadily. There's Shadows of the Empire, Luke and Leia are coming this year still. So we're still constantly getting these new figures coming out. So we were going to discuss, who do you think we'll see next? What characters do you think we'll get in the Black Series run of figures next? What Funko Pops do you think we could see next? They've been doing mostly games, but with the Shadows of the Empire Prince Xizor figure I have up here, they announced it's the start of like a publishing line, which would infer maybe novels and comics.
Really? What did they say specifically?
That's it's Maxine who told me about that. She said during the panel they said it was the start of a new wave within Black Series where they were going to be doing like novelization and comic based figures.
That's incredible.
Which is great. That opens up the gates, right? If they're going to continue.
Don't you think
with that.
though? I guess what's so tricky about that though is, don't you think, like, I mean, it's one thing to say they're going to do novels or to speculate that they're going to do novels, but I mean, realistically, they're going to have to go off artwork, right? Which is why the games or the comics are going to be. Oh yeah, but I mean, I don't know how they're going to do certain characters that we actually haven't seen before.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
Maybe there's not a lot, but I mean, if we want to think of like deep cuts, right? But
yeah, for sure. I mean, could they be first visually depicted as figures? That's crazy that we're just talking about this, and Dash Rendar was just revealed right now.
I said that was going to be one of them.
You said that earlier to me today. Today, Brady said that Dash Rendar is coming next.
Well, I think the answer is obvious. There's some very easy figures they could do. They could do a Luke's Jedi Academy with the original 12 Jedi Knights. I think they could do a lot from New Jedi Order. Maybe a character from each book, maybe 2 characters from each book. Add the artwork to the
Brystode.
Right.
They did him. He comes with a mountain of bodies to put him on.
Do we have a Darth Kaitis? I don't think we have a Darth Kaitis.
We have Jaina. We don't have Jason Solo, Anakin Solo.
Someone said Darth
Skywalker. We need Ben Skywalker.
We need Cade Skywalker.
I was about to say, dude, how about a Cade Skywalker and Darth Crate Black Series? There you go.
That would be amazing.
I can already see Cade. Cade comes with like his lightsaber and the fucking double barrel, you know?
Yeah.
Well, there have been some legacy comic pack characters.
In the past,
I think they did Cade. But as Black Series,
Talon.
There's one that'll make Lucasfilm cry. Ben Skywalker. Because wasn't there a whole controversy with that?
There was a huge controversy, and they still owe us that. And the tragedy is there's actually for people who don't know, there were a couple of years when Hasbro opened it up to fans to basically vote and select on various slots for characters. And for a year or two, our fandom showed up and dominated those polls, told them that we're fans too, we collect
Use that
things
for
too,
content.
and that's how we got Star Killer and a couple of others. But yeah, the Hasbro poll results were for Ben Skywalker, and we've yet to see him. And there were others that we voted on, other EU related ones that we've yet to see. So there's actually a huge backlog, as far as I'm concerned, of ones that we're essentially owed. So I don't know if I ever get to those.
Jaina and Star Killer were the real products of that, right?
Yeah.
And that just goes to show the demand pays off. It may not pay off immediately, but if we show our interest in something and just keep hounding them, eventually it does pay off. In this case with the Black Series and things like whatever they got going with Dash Rendar and that. I'm not sure those are necessarily the action figures I'd like to see. I think there's some very obvious ones from the EU that would be very successful, but
I just say I would just be shocked if, again, whatever they want to call us, publishing wave or whatever, I'd be shocked if it weren't just characters that have like a video game overlap. Like again, we're gonna get a lot of KOTOR. I mean, we're gonna get another Darth Nihilus. I mean, just
Darth
things
Revan.
Yeah,
basically the litmus test is going to be can a random person at GameStop recognize the character? Right. That's gonna and that's fine still. It is what it is. But yeah, it's not my top of my list yet.
Arthur said he wants Guri.
That's funny. Yeah, that would be a good one. With the Shadows of the Empire evolution.
Yes, we should have we need a Savan with a Rhodian backdrop. I think we need that, right, Brady?
Oh yeah.
Or a Scott Johnson.
Is that the action figure? Is that the action figure art right there? Yeah. I think that as you can see, they've been video game heavy. SWOTOR and KOTOR figures. They've definitely been Republic Commando, Force Unleashed, Shadows of the Empire now. The comic ones that we do have are Kirk Hanos, who was famously erroneously named.
Yeah.
And we have Jackson as well, which is kind of now a new canon character from my understanding. We have Mara Jade, we have Jaina.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more novel / comic figures that would be great to see eventually. But basically what's exciting, and Maxine's about to outline this as well, is these are separate lines. The Gaming Greats figure lines are at GameStop, and they're what's done Force Unleashed, KOTOR, SWOTOR related figures. With this Shadows of the Empire sort of publishing line that's starting, it's presumably going to try to be more novel and comic.
But again, I mean that's the perfect example to start with, right? Because again, it's a known iconic video game, and there's other visual representations. No, I don't want to be cynical about it. I mean, again, I hope we get characters from New Rebellion that we never saw in Iraq. I mean,
imagine,
but
yeah. I mean, Kyle Katarn is one that I expect to see next. I expect to see Mission Veo from KOTOR and all the rest of the companions very soon. I'm shocked we haven't seen Ram Koda yet. I'm sure he'll come very soon down the pipeline.
Good point.
Imagine a Canderous Ordo with his Mando armor from KOTOR 2. Wouldn't that be badass?
That'd be badass.
That would be so
a Darth Talon, Darth Maul double pack. It'll be the best friend.
The George
pack.
Lucas approved pack.
George Lucas approved. They're made friends.
No. Replace Maul with just a George Lucas Black Series figure in the Talon pack. George and Talon.
He already has that made.
Yeah.
There was some controversy. There is a Lego Star Wars Lego logo that came out. And people were upset that George Lucas was not an included minifigure with that. But
didn't Lego recently dip its toes into Legends? They had the Darth Revan one from a while ago and a bunch of
years ago.
That was 10 years
recently.
They're
like a year ago, they did
with like
Darth Malak.
the EU stuff because they did one with the micro series Anakin Starfighter, and then they snuck in like also like EU Ventress. And they kind of subtly did it with Grievous as well, where they recolored Grievous where like he's more white like he is in the micro series.
That's cool.
Like he's no longer like the TCW beige.
Yeah. And then they had Malgus. Somebody said that. He was
Malik,
Yeah.
I think, right? Wasn't it Malik
20
that they did
Malgus.
or
last year?
Malik.
Malik. Well, I mean, there's a Malgus one in Sith Troopers.
An older
Teal
one, yeah.
Sean.
That's about 10 years old though.
Yeah, Jace Malcolm.
Those are cool. They're really cool.
Someone
Yeah.
said
We should
Zane
get a naked Palpatine figure.
Ooh.
Just for Alex.
I'll work
Yeah.
on it. Custom.
Abby
Find
ready
editions custom.
You know what? They should, if they want to get cute, because they've done like George Lucas himself, right? Like I forget what's the character's name? Papa. No, and he's in Clone Wars too.
Papa Neomodia or something.
Papa
like
Neomodia.
that.
But they should do a Timothy Zahn character, like just the writer Timothy Zahn. I mean, you can see in his all black outfit he wears to convention. I mean, it'd be interesting if they really wanted it.
Well,
that's like a real dark horse idea. But
he modeled...
do you know what I think? This is slightly off the EU topic. I think that modern Star Wars toys have really sucked at play sets. Like, I mean, even as late as the Episode 1 era, where you could actually put together the entire Jedi Council, like with the seats, and you could come up with some custom flooring and stuff like that.
All those figures.
Yeah, I mean, it's just beautiful to see them all, right? And I think I've said this before, but you know what I really want to see? It's not EU, but I'm shocked they never made the Opera House, the seating where you could put Anakin and Palpatine. Wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, can you imagine
the Vert guy, Swait Conquerkill, who was sitting beside them too? That would be great. I'd love that. Yeah.
I think the Micro Machines did a much better job with the play sets because you have a lot more space to work with. The figures are smaller, so you could add more to the scene that you're trying to design.
Yeah,
I guess that doesn't work too well with adult fans. It's more of a kiddie thing. But
I think play sets, I don't know what happened to play sets. When I was younger, I would get play sets with my toys. Like, for example, I grew up with the 2010 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 3D animated one. And since I grew up with it, I think it's the best one of that. It's the TMNT one, and it went with the cooler branding, and their eyes go white. I'm still very nostalgic about that series.
Wait, you're talking
I love
about 03
that one.
Turtles?
The 2010 Turtles.
Oh, the 2010 Turtles. Yeah.
I love those ones. And they sold a play set in the first, I think I still have it in my garage. It's the giant sewer layer, and they sold one play set for wave one of toys. They had 20 ways, 15 or 20 ways, never another play set. So it's really unfortunate that it does seem like they prioritize the figures over the play sets anymore. And maybe that's just the shift in toy industry is more to adults buying the figures to pose / keep in packaging rather than actually play with stuff in a landscape. I don't know.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. Who brings their kid to GameStop to buy toys? Not really. It's all adults buying that stuff now.
Me?
Okay.
You're
an adult,
Lance. Breaking news. The Star Wars EU baby on the way.
The pendulum's swinging back because you look at the vintage Playmates Turtles that they're reissuing.
Oh yeah.
They're bringing some of those play sets back. I mean, certainly the vehicles. They've got like the pizza launcher vehicle, and I think they even have the blimp, you know what I mean? All this kind of crazy stuff. And I think they might be doing the sewer thing too that they had with the vintage Playmates too. But this has been big in He-Man, where they've redone Castle Grayskull. They've redone a couple
Snake
of
Mountain?
different play sets. Snake Mountain, and then Eternia, the massive thing that they only made 4,000 of back in the late 80s. They brought that back.
Oh wow!
And kind of like a similar sort of like to the Revenge of the Sith thing, like a pre-order deal, $500. It's the sort of thing where it's like,
I love
it's
He-Man.
so expensive, you're not going to let your kids play with it, so it's going to sit in the box. But no, I mean, I guess it seems to me another one of these funny areas where like Star Wars is now somehow kind of getting lapped by every other IP. But I mean,
seems like it, doesn't it?
I mean, they did the massive marquee thing, however many years ago that was now, for Jabba's
sail barge.
What's the word I'm looking? The sail barge, yeah. And that was like, how many thousands of dollars was that? It was probably worth every penny. But so they've gone really big with some of these kind of like more special event things. But
I began to feel old because just a month ago they announced that they're reissuing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures that I grew up with. and putting them back in stores with new packaging. I was like, that was only like 15 years ago. Like, dang, already? Like, that seems really early to be reissuing like the fourth Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle show franchise? Like, already? Like, I did not like that feeling at all. It's weird, but I guess all of my ones are back in stores, so that's interesting. The show's not been running for like a decade anyways, so it becomes a weird thing, right? But the toys seem to outlast shows and movies anyways. The toys keep being sold.
I think they want to give the Ninja Turtles, at least your generation, because they've got this new generation coming up with that new movie that just came out.
Oh,
yeah. So they're trying to basically milk your generation for that.
I'm not gonna lie, they almost had me, because I remember how great it felt when I would like rake leaves and get enough money to go to Walmart and buy one figure and tear that packaging open, and that was just so fun. My brother, if he did more work than me, would get two.
Oh wow!
As he would typically do.
I raked the neighbor's leaves just to buy one Jedi Prince books, one by one, like $5 each.
That's amazing.
Slave wages back then.
I guess with inflation, I got paid a little bit more. You know,
right. I was an adult whenever I started collecting EU stuff. So, but Lego was where my stuff went.
Yeah, that's what you told me.
Which I did get, like the Old Republic Battle Pack, which I'm glad I got.
That's so cool. What's the one that's one of the rarest is that Toys R Us Revan, right? It was only at Toys R Us and was only sold as a minifigure in like a little package.
So that was the May the 4th promotional bag. You only got it if you spent more than like $150 on Lego.com that weekend.
That's crazy.
Yeah, which they have one
worth a lot, isn't it?
It's like $500.
Oh my god.
That's one of my like golden goose, what I like my, on there.
Yeah.
Ones. I have Malgus, which is like the second place, I think.
When did that minifig come out? Do you remember what year specifically?
2014.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember after decanonization, I remember that being one of those things that everyone said in the mad dash to just like gather everything up before it got lost forever. There were definitely a bunch floating around on eBay at the time, but I mean, yeah, they're probably either long gone or like, skyrocketed.
Yeah,
I remember tons of people vacuuming them right up, like
on Bricklink, that Revan figure is going for like $300.
Oh my god.
The head
That's
alone
a steal.
The head alone is like the head alone is like a lot. Because I think the head and the torso are the only exclusive pieces to the set. Or to the the thing, and so like just the head would be like $50, which honestly wouldn't be that bad. It's probably gone up since then. I need to look that up.
Brady's going to be buying the Revan minifigure in 4 different parts live for the rest of the stream.
Yes.
The last thing that we had on the docket to talk about is a new podcast series that started up over on Lance's channel, Vode An. Y'all did Approaching Storm. And you're going through the Clone Wars multimedia project. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, Titus wanted to reread the Clone Wars because that's his favorite era. And he invited Ken and myself to read it with him. And I said, what the hell, why not? So we're using his timeline, which is like a amalgamation of like a bunch of other timelines and then his own stuff. So we're doing all the books, all the comics, micro series, bunch of short stories. We're not doing TCW because we don't got time for that.
We are doing TCW adjacent media though. Because there's just there's no way around it. It is part of the chronology. You gotta push through the shit,
Yep.
Are you gonna watch the micro series?
That's a good summary of the TCW era.
We're watching through the micro series,
Oh, nice, nice.
Are you gonna
We're
review
basically
my?
doing as much as we can. We're doing as much as we can.
Boba Fett books too, right? Those
Yeah,
are
dude.
cool.
Yep.
And it's everything. Like, I mean,
Yep.
Brennan, you probably know what I'm talking about, but you remember the old Toys R Us short stories, Duel,
Yeah, I have that up
um,
on
Duel, what's it called? The
Yeah,
Stormfleet
I have
warnings.
that. I'll grab that.
Yeah, Stormfleet warnings, the Duel, like all that. Like that's part of the timeline as well. Hey, I even got the fucking Target exclusive story, fucking Outfoxed. That's on there
Mhm.
too.
Skywalkers is on there. We're gonna do that. Abel G. Pena. I mean everything. Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir is gonna be on there too. We're gonna do that.
I love Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir. I think that comic's amazing.
Dude,
Yep, we're gonna do
Okay,
that.
Klumer.
Brennan, I had a comic on there that Lance didn't know about, and Ken didn't know about it either. But like, do you remember Death Sentence?
Yeah. Oh, Death Sentence is amazing.
It's like even just like beyond them two, bro. It's like I don't see anyone ever bring up Death Sentence ever. It's almost like it's like a comic that existed, but like no one talks about it.
Yeah. No one talks about it, and what's
It's
crazy
the
is
prequel
they
to Son of
included-
Dathomir.
What's
Yeah.
crazy about it is they included the Padawan grows up to be the guy in Dark Empire, Dre. So like there's some deep cut EU connections in there.
I thought he was in Invasion.
Or sorry, yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant. Invasion.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Not Dark Empire. Yeah, you're right, Brady. In my head I said Invasion. Yeah, there's some deep cut stuff in there, like Invasion getting love in other comics. That's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Should it though? Does it deserve it? I'm just kidding.
If
think
you
they
guys,
came out-
huh?
Does
I mean,
not deserve it.
if you guys are interested, I could post. I guess is there a way for if Chris Nelson is interested? Let me see if there's a way I can post it into the chat.
The timeline that you're using?
Yeah, but I was gonna say though, about the games because, you know, with Ken and Lance, I kind of had to pull teeth. They didn't want to play the games aside from Republic Commando. So what I did is that, you know what? Let me screenshot summaries of the events of those games from the New Essential Chronology, hit them on my timeline because they're too fucking lazy. And we'll just read those little blurbs to get the gist of what happens during the events of the game.
They don't want to play the Clone Wars 2002.
No, dude, they don't want to play. I mean, hell, man, I wouldn't want to play through the
Legendary.
I wouldn't want to play through the Clone Wars again, dude. Like, be honest with you. Like
That game was so hard. Oh my God.
we've had an extensive conversation, me and you, Brennan, about how hard that shit is, bro. Like the final level,
It's a hard game.
there's one checkpoint throughout that whole final mission.
I know.
And then it's
What
like
were they
the
smoking?
final the Dark Reaper itself, the boss fight is incredibly vague on what the fuck you do. You just like shoot at it until the shields go down. And you have like
Yeah.
Ulick Keldrum's
And
ghost
then-
in his fucking ears like, oh, use the force barrier to resist the force drain, Anakin. Use what I taught you. Like Ulick does nothing to actually help you in that fight. He's just yapping.
Yeah, I know. It's
The
crazy
famous-
that they put a Tales of the Jedi character in that absolute abomination of a game.
And
Like,
it's
I was
funny
so
because
excited
they
for it, too.
inadvertently made like Tales of Jedi like worse by doing that.
I was so excited to play the game because I was like, Tales of the Jedi character shows up.
No.
So I'm like playing through the game waiting for it, and I was like, that was it? Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean that was it, and the connection that made like it's a plot hole if anything. I talk about this with like Ken because they say that Ulick after losing his connection to the Force, that he decides to help the Jedi against this Dark Reaper. But I'm just kind of like thinking in the comic, you know, that guy was so fucking distraught after everything that had happened. Like he just kind of like was just I don't know catatonic. He wasn't doing anything. That's what I'm trying to say. So I can't really believe that, you know, it's like, actually, let me have a change of heart real quick. Guys, this is how you defeat the super weapon. Help. Like, this is how you do it. And then he goes back, oh, I'm sad. Yeah. I killed my brother. Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah, that game is dog water. This is the short story collection you were talking about, Titus, right?
Yeah,
do the,
dude, you actually own it physically? Damn.
Yeah, are you going to get the Toys R Us ones?
Yeah, I mean those are on the those are on the list, but I'm not physically buying that, bro.
Those are some weird ones.
I have PDFs of those. Paizo official PDFs of them. Though what's funny is that they have a Clone Wars timeline on their website from the PDF, and it's inaccurate because it's like they rearranged the dates of the second Boba Fett book. They said that the Battle of Raxus Prime and that book takes place after the Clone Wars game.
Right.
Which that can't be because the Battle of Raxus Prime, it ends with the Dark Reaper being destroyed.
Yep.
So
Here's the
crazy
thing,
that
though.
they were even going to put a reference to a game in that Boba Fett Young Readers novel. The fact that they even tried is pretty crazy.
I mean, at most, like I think the most like reference thing from that game and that Boba Fett book is the fact that Sidon Prax, like the Chiss story bounty hunter, he shows up in it.
I
found
love
it
this.
so weird they
I love
retconned
this
to be like a
comment
Chiss
right here.
story, dude. It's like he looks nothing like a Chiss story in the game. You don't even get to see his fucking face, you know?
Yeah.
What were you about to say?
I love this comment here. It's kind of poetic that Ulick Keldroma met Anakin while Exar Kun met Luke. It's like poetry. It rhymes. It's the George Lucas way.
It's just like poetry.
Yeah, that is cool. I had never thought about that before. That is actually really interesting. I had not thought about that.
You know what makes it even better poetry? That was all unintentional anyway. I don't think them jackasses making that game thought about it like, guys, Exar Kun met Luke, so let's have a look at meet Anakin.
So you're
It's a
telling
happy
me
I don't
accident.
think they were that. I don't think they were that ahead of the curve, dude. But like, it is unintentionally, it is cool.
Yeah.
So you're saying that Ahsoka needs to meet Nomi Sunrider?
Yeah.
It would be the Trinity then. It would be the Trinity. Yeah.
The Trinity
three,
will not
meet
be
the big
complete
three.
otherwise.
I have to say I can't wait for the Vode An episode where you guys break down the Clone Wars video game because Titus commentary. I love this.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is my personality. But like, it's just I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that with all the games, we kind of have to read the descriptions. He won New Droid Army. I mean, hell, I remember. I think Lance
that
got
game
mad.
is really fun though. Actually, I like that
Dude,
game.
I hate that game because like I tried emulating it and it's like I fucking died by like some goddamn womp rat. Or not like a womp rat. It's like something in them Tatooine caves that killed me. And then whenever Aura Singh shows up, I just die.
The
Yeah.
hounds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you gonna say whenever you review them, are you gonna tell us how your gameplay through it?
Oh no.
Okay.
Well, I'm not. I don't want to play any of the games. If they're not playing it, I'm not playing it. But I will play Galactic Battlegrounds because my one friend, Drake, he's playing through it. Like we kind of agreed to both play through it.
Was New Droid Army the only Game Boy Advance EU game?
Unless you count the Revenge of the Sith game.
Oh
then,
yeah, which is kind of non-canonical, right?
Yeah. It's like an anime-ified Revenge of the Sith, that one.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird one for sure.
But I was gonna say that like Lance, what were you gonna say, Scott?
Oh, never mind. Chris was gonna say something. I was gonna let him.
Oh, I was gonna mention like one quick thing is like about like not even like cross canons, like with cross media. I think it was either Ken or Lance. They were like kind of like jokingly getting mad. And I told him like, all right, guys, I gotta hunker down and read a short story from the Central Guide to Warfare, where Ahsoka writes a letter to a character from Dark Rendezvous.
It's cinema. It's cinema. And she writes it in high. She doesn't write it in Orabesh. She writes it in high galactic standard.
Exactly. Great. But it's like they were like retaliating, like, no, I'm not reading that shit. No, it's stupid.
Have you not introduced them to Clone Trooper Falls in a Hole yet?
Dude, I told them about that, and they're like, what the fuck is a Clone Trooper Falls in a Hole? I was like, oh man, that's like that's the best 2-page story in the whole EU.
It's a perfect continuation of the approaching storm, with all those holes that you're falling into. It's a perfect continuation off of that.
Yeah.
No, that short story is actually really good.
We are gonna read that.
Yeah, you gotta read Clone Trooper Falls in a Hole, dude. You're gonna love it.
It's great.
Yeah,
the art piece with it shows his visor like looking up at super battle droids above him. It's super cinematic.
Are you guys gonna read awesome. No Prisoners? The TCW
of course, dude. We're reading it all.
We have a special.
Huh? We say Lance.
I was gonna say we got a special thumbnail for those Clone Wars, those TCW.
Oh yeah, we do. We have a special. I can't disclose.
That's all we're gonna say.
But
I'll say cowboy hat on there.
Dragon out of hell. That's the best way I can describe it. Those thumbnails.
Can I spoil the ending? The Clone Trooper Falls in a hole.
Yeah, man.
What is he called?
He gets a medal, and he's like, they gave me a medal. Said that I had all this valor, said that I had all this honor, said that I was so intelligent for how I defeated my enemies. He's like, shoot, I wasn't intelligent. Smartest thing I did was fall in a hole. It's golden.
Yep.
What a
the story
badass.
ends like
that's
that.
A badass.
So cool.
I
was
bet
just
he,
gonna
I bet
make.
he died on the battle track in like fucking few months later. He's such a badass.
Oh, he died a few weeks later for sure.
Oh, he died a few weeks later. God damn, never mind.
Chris, what do
I
you
was
got?
I was just gonna make the stupid point, although it's directly relevant now based on what you said, Brennan. That I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but here's how the Clone Wars end. Yeah, the Republic loses and the Sith win, and I guess the reason I say that is all of the consternation over like when people want to do their timelines, and I'm looking forward to you guys' podcast about when you get to this area, like which goes before which thing, which Boba Fett children's book. It does nothing we'll ever learn about the Clone Wars changes how they end it and what happens afterwards, right? So I've stopped getting too bothered by any of that stuff, you know. I will say, by the way, Titus, you mentioned Galactic Battlegrounds, which is great.
Yeah.
Consider Pax Empirica, the short story from the strategy guide, which
so
is
good.
It's sort of, is it in it?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, well, it's not in my timeline per se, but I kind of forgot about Pax Empirica.
It's Clone Wars
yeah,
adjacent in some ways.
Right. The
It would probably be a
when
good
they burn
epilogue.
when they burn down like Kashyyyk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be a good epilogue episode, honestly.
Well, there is gonna be an epilogue segment because Lance kind of, I don't know if it was Lance that brought it up to me. No, it was because that we had 500 and not 500 for Order 66, and then Lance was like, "No, how come we don't have like some early Dark Time stuff?" I was like, "Okay, so let's put in Rise of Darth Vader. Let's put in Kenobi. Let's put in
Last
Order
of the
66.
Jedi. Force on Knights.
Oh no, not that far, dude. No.
Well, we want to end it with Imperial Commando 501st because that book is not a conclusion because the book has a cliffhanger ending, I know, but that's sort of, you know, it ties into Republic Commando. So we want to end it there.
It's a continuation of the TTW.
That might change.
But I will add Pax Empirica though. I'm gonna add that.
There's a really cool magazine I have, and I don't know if I ever did a whole video about it. I feel like I shared it at some point on a stream, and it's from from the early '80s, and it's like a film industry magazine, but it's all about what the Clone Wars were, based on everything they knew at the time. And Star Wars is only a couple years old, but it's a whole article all about what it's going to look like. And the interesting thing is, it got a lot right, but it would be interesting to go back and find those really sort of ancient sources. Now, this was just a real world magazine article, but it's based on everything they knew from Lucasfilm, is a way of sort of tracking how sort of the prehistory of the Clone Wars changes from what I
love prequel Clone Wars information. Like there's even some of those Star Wars third-party RPGs that you got me on that have like early Republic stories that are really fascinating. And I just think it's interesting to try to get them to fit and work in continuity because you can. I truly believe you shouldn't just throw out anything just because. I really think there's a way to make everything fit.
They make Heir to the Empire fit now in the context of that.
I mean, it depends, Brennan. It really does depend because like I don't think there's a workaround with something like in TCW where what's his name dies. Like Valorum, like he's perfectly fine. You know, despite you clearly see him explode.
It was a fake. They faked his death.
Yeah, like he has like a body double like Padme.
It was the Valorum
like
clone from where Dooku got his doppelganger.
Oh yeah.
It was
Valorum's doppelganger. Spartai Valorum. That's
Spartai Valorum. Adds up.
I just kind of see
I mean, if Padme had like doppelganger or not doppelganger, but like doubles and whatever, like. I don't think it's that impossible for the Republic Chancellor to have something.
Maybe
even a former Chancellor.
I mean, logically, maybe Valorum would. It's just I just find it a little bit funny the idea that like he just had a fucking body double and like everyone took like the death of like a body double so seriously in the comics.
What people always forget is that even Peel had a younger brother named Peven Eel, and Peven Eel died during the Clone Wars era. Even Peel lived long enough to train Jax Pavon. You know,
that was a clone.
Not this one, please.
It doesn't matter though. This is like a super weird. This is a super weird analogy, but I remember like 20 years ago, whenever Obama became president, I can't do math right now. I remember everyone was like, you know, all like these wackos were like, well, you know, he was born in Kenya. He's not really an American citizen. He can't be president. It's as if they thought if they could prove that somehow like Obamacare would no longer be the law. Right. And again, believe me, I get all the consternation about the Clone Wars utter wackiness, all of which was completely avoidable, but it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, you're right.
Whatever the truth is about Ivan Pill, we know the Clone Wars ended.
Either
and we
way,
got
he
the rest
dies.
of Galactic history to tell the story.
I mean, of course, we know how it ends, but the whole thing we're talking about is like the stuff that's in between.
Right.
And
I think
if the stuff in between like doesn't matter, I don't think there's even really a reason for it to be told at that point.
You could say that just in general about the whole timeline. We know in general, maybe not how it ends, but where it ends. So these things like are kind of important because like what's the explanation on your favorite character? How did they end up? If you're looking at a way to read it in the right order or speculating in that order, I think it does have some importance.
I know, and I know I sound silly, and I'm also hypocritical because this stuff really matters, but it's just funny to me how I guess it's just so sad how avoidable all these issues were.
Oh, totally.
From the perspective of the creators who didn't need to wade into these issues and stuff. On the other hand, it's just sort of like, it's amazing how much of this happens about this one particular era, right? Like we don't have these same debates about every single era. I mean, thankfully, we're not. You don't hear people in the same way say, "Well, I'm never going to read New Jedi Order. Like I can't get into that because of this one thing I can't quite square about this one character, one scenario." The way people want to throw out the era of the Clone Wars, I guess, is the reason I just say, of the various eras, it's sort of one link in the chain.
Right.
We are physically able to get past it and to continue that's the only reason I make that point.
No, I get that. And a lot of it stems from Clone Wars and frustration about the Clone Wars.
It's also a very dense era. And when they originally had tried to do the timeline by weeks and months, like that level of dedication and fine tuning, to have that obliterated is just kind of unfortunate. But at the same time, yeah, it does all lead to the same place, which is the Jedi losing. So ultimately it does end up in the same place. The place that I've come out on all of this eventually, just from thinking about it, is wars are a very chaotic time. So if one date is recorded erroneously, if one character death's recorded erroneously, I can forgive that. War is a tumultuous time. How many records were destroyed? So if you look at it from an in-universe perspective, I think it can still work. It's just not been translated properly, right? Like dates can get scrambled during a conflict.
I think what you're saying is true. It's just like it's kind of like it's kind of Fence City, and it's like a Fence City in a way that I don't really like. It's kind of like how the essentially God of Warfare handled the Grievous Origin debacle, where it's like you have Abel G. Pena's one or Warren Fu or whoever like all contributes to all that, but and you have the one with George. He's like, no, he was just some guy that was rejected by the Jedi. He was bitter about it and became a cyborg despite them. Since we got a warfare, basically just said, well, historians can't really figure out which one of the two is true. So for lack of better thing to say, is just it could be a toss up. And I just think it's kind of like
at least cheap. It made an effort.
It's a slight effort. It's kind of like cheap. It's like you're not even like really making. You're not taking a stance on it. You're just saying like, well, you're confused about it, and we don't know.
It's the same way that Pena sort of tried to do a little bit in Skywalkers. I remember he mentioned that Quinlan Vos had made a joke about something, and that to me was him trying to reconcile, because in the same moment he referenced the Republic comics, but the fact that he's making Quinlan make a joke says to me that that's trying to be a little wink at how goofy he was in TCW, like the fact that he was making quips and jokes. Yeah, the way it was done. The way it was done.
Some Republic comics, he kind of does
totally.
make like sarcastic, dry banter. Like
definitely, the way it was to me intentionally goofy. I think it was his effort. I think I saw him post about that as well. It explained away a nickname for Grievous in Skywalkers, if I remember correctly. That he'd given Grievous apparently during the Clone Wars. Obi-Wan like smiled remembering it. Then he was like, "Oh man, Quinlan's probably dead." So yeah, it was. I love Skywalkers. It's so good.
It is really good.
Yeah.
I was gonna mention though, like
that's my most.
Hold on 1 second, Lance. It's about the timeline. Because I was gonna mention that I also had the CIA. At least I'm gonna put it on there at some point. The CIS Shadow Feed and the HoloNet.
Yeah, I was gonna ask
All
about those. Those are so
like
good.
all of that is gonna get added on there because although they're not stories, they kind of do contribute very important lore
Oh yeah.
to follow publishing wise
Escape from
about the Clone
Dago's
Wars.
in there, isn't it?
Yeah, literally, like there's like so much that we got away from that, like Operation Dirge's Lance. That the whole concept comes from there. You
Yeah.
know, now we're gonna say, Lance.
I was gonna say that Skywalker's out of all the Clone Wars stories that we're gonna read, Skywalker's is my most anticipated.
It's really good. You're gonna enjoy it.
That and Yoda Dark Rendezvous, both of those stories. And yes, it is because of you, Chris. That's why that one's my most. Because I
Okay.
guess I never would have expected that to be your favorite. I think it's your favorite too, Scott. It's your favorite too, right?
Yeah, I've said it for a long time. And I think
Yeah.
I first met
Top 10
Chris
for me.
on the discussion, or one of the Facebook groups or something,
Yeah.
saying who is your favorite, what was your favorite novel, and I think we both had the same one. But even when that came out, I think that got a lot of people involved in the prequel era. I had completely written the prequel era off after what was it, Approaching Storm, and then I once I read Yoda Dark Rendezvous in anticipation for episode 3, I kind of worked my way backwards, and I ended up enjoying it. So it really brought a lot of perspective with Dooku and Yoda, made him a more interesting character, and I think it made him serve a purpose that you didn't otherwise realize just watching the movies.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then
definitely
Stover
excited
turned
for
him to
that.
Space Hitler. I mean, it's true, dude. Like the way Dooku is written compared to how he's in the beginning of Revenge of the Sith versus how he's in Dark Rendezvous, it's like day and night.
Here, I'll answer this one real quick. What are your thoughts on Quinlan Voss and TCW? Don't like it because I like Republic comics better. Now, the first place I ever saw Quinlan Voss was in that Cad Bane episode. That was my first exposure to him. But then I love the Republic comics way more. I don't love the TCW one. At the same time, I think the two depictions can be reconciled. I hate everything about the Asajj Ventress thing in Disney canon. Absolutely disgusted by it. It's stupid. Get that out of here.
I had no idea that was
Yeah,
do
now
not
she's
like it.
back, so none of it even mattered.
Yeah, Quinlan and Asajj had a
Bane.
romance in the new timeline. I don't like that at all. That was never inferred in the old timeline. And to this question, I guess we can close with this. What do you guys think about this? I think slightly, only because of TCW, I think it's Clone Wars is more complicated, convoluted. Only because of TCW makes it a little bit more. Otherwise, Rebellion era might be more packed, might be more complicated. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think especially because they tied it down with each month of the Clone Wars, in some cases the week, and you have things like a 10-month year in Star Wars that people probably aren't aware of unless they read the Star Wars Atlas. In some cases it's 12 months, some cases it's 10 months, depending upon the story. So it can get really convoluted, and especially with all the events that happen to occur in sequence. They have to occur in sequence to make logical sense. It's just a nightmare. Whereas the stories between episode 4 and 5, there's a lot of them. They're very similar, but you can move them around such that it doesn't really mess up the the logical progression of the characters and their development.
Totally. Brady?
Which is more complicated, TCW or Clone Wars and Republic? Is that the question? Rebellion. I'm sorry. I kind of side with Scott with this. The multimedia project, I feel like they were too good at what they were doing with creating okay, this is what happened day 1, this is what happened day 2, this is what happened day 3, that they completed it. Like, it was like, this is set in stone, this is how it is. Anything added would fracture that. And so that might have been a problem that they did before. I don't know. I think if they wanted to add more to the Clone Wars, they should have retconned it where it was slightly longer. But with the Rebellion stories, like we read for our podcast, or for Alex's podcast earlier today.
Yeah.
There were stories that were thrown in there as tie-ins to A New Hope. Luke went to pilot school or whatever it was. There were so many stories like that, and they just threw them to see what would stick. Like Scott was saying, you can just kind of move it around, change it here.
Definitely.
I think
more mobile.
I think the only or it might not even be the Rebellion era, but there's like one comic that like just doesn't fit out of all of them. All of them can be just rearranged just right. There's like one comic that is like that can't really fit anywhere, and I think it was like one of the 3D comics.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. There's one detail in Blackthorn, Star Wars 3D #1 that's pretty hard to reconcile. We'll get there in Wayback Machine at some point. Maybe we'll come up with an idea.
But there's a lot more of a challenge with Clone Wars.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of
Lance.
From what I know of each era, I'd probably say Clone Wars. For a lot of the stuff, like what Brady was saying, the stories in that era are very objective. Like they're very black and white. Like this is how it is. There is no, room or anything for anything else. And I also think that if you look at like how many years are within each respective era, the Clone Wars was a hell of a lot shorter of an era, and it probably had maybe just as much stories, maybe a little less, but they're trying to cram it all in that 3-year time span. Well, like, but the Rebellion was like what, 5 or 6 years?
Yeah,
3,
maybe, give or take.
So depends on where you put it.
Well, I guess it
Return of
depends
the
on where
Jedi's
it
3
starts.
years later, right?
Yeah, but doesn't the Rebellion, like, it actually starts a few years before New Hope?
I think some people consider it to start before.
Well, the convoluted or the complicated stuff starts after A New Hope, because you follow like Luke, Han, and Leia.
And as Matt Wilkins famously, I don't know if he's the first one who said it, but someone said they barely had time to use the bathroom. I've heard that floating around the fandom for years now. I don't know who coined it, but everyone says that about Han, Luke, and Leia during the Rebellion time,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Matt says that every video he's ever made, and so it's become kind of commonplace, and no one's examined it for themselves. But his question specifically about 4 through 5, which is interesting, and 5 through 6 is just like, it's so weird they never exploited that more than they did.
Yeah, it's kind of barren compared to the 4 to 5. There was a lot going on in there.
It's because Han Solo wasn't in it. I feel like.
I mean, maybe.
That's like one thing. Because I don't know, like thinking about that question is kind of weird, because the multimedia project, I think for the most part, it is kind of seamless. But I think one big problem in it is that you have so many different mediums and so many different creatives.
Yeah.
Like not everyone's literally on the same page. It's kind of something like I would, tell some of my friends about, like the micro series. But the micro series has like a lot of glaring plot holes that don't really mesh with the multimedia project. But like the new essential chronology, kind of have to maneuver things so it makes sense. I think most notoriously is Ventress getting her lightsabers and going after Anakin, which by the micro series logic is implying that their first meeting is during the Battle of Munilus, when chronologically speaking, their first real meeting would be on Omadune. And that's where I kind of think that I don't think Gendy was really on the same page as Ostrander. And there's even little things in like Galactic Battlegrounds. There's like some fine contradictions where like Severance Tana is the most trusted dark acolyte of Dooku, despite, in hindsight, we would know that to be Ventress.
Yeah.
I don't know. My whole point I'm making is just like, there's a lot of moving parts in the multimedia project where I think it's just vastly more complicated by that. And with the OT, it's like they're very complicated, but I think that the stuff with the Marvel comics and some of those early novels is only really complicated because they don't really have a sense of direction of where stuff would happen in between the films, It's like the period between 4 and 5. There's no way in hell they could actually really predict what the fuck would happen in Empire. So they would just have to kind of make shit that would then contradict later on.
That's where it really felt like that in Marvel issue number 7.
That's when we have like stuff like Empire and Rebellion, the comic series. It's a lot more seamless because they have all that hindsight context of, this is what happens in the film, so we can avoid those type of contradictions. I feel like only contradictions crop up because they don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then they introduced the Brian Wood run in 2013 and just said, whatever, let's just reboot it.
Yeah.
Randy Stradley says, no, I'm not going to get into all that.
Well,
soft reboot to a
depends when you ask him.
Supposed to be a part of it, but not.
Just from a fan perspective, as Scott and I know personally, having been kicked out of Star Wars groups before on the Clone Wars question, obviously it's the most complicated of the two eras by virtue of the fact that if you have what's deemed to be politically incorrect view about aspects of it, you're not considered a real fan. So no one thinks that if you misplace Maverick Moon, right, that like you're a jerk, right? Or you're a Filoni shill, right?
Yeah.
No one, right?
People get,
but you've got to walk on eggshells around the Clone Wars this many years on.
They either love it, like, and it's their favorite part of Star Wars, or it's their most hated anti-Dave Filoni, that narrative stuff. So it does get really convoluted just on a personal level. I've been attacked for what I've said about Clone Wars before. I'm sure everyone has. I don't think it's that big a deal. I like parts of TCW, don't like others. I wish it was more seamless so we didn't have to talk about this for a decade. But hey, I think this will always be around. As long as there's people around there, they'll be talking about this, saying the same thing for decades. I think getting us to a lot of places.
I think by itself, even in the Disney canon, it is a hot mess and should be not canon. But that's just me.
Yeah. Well,
it creates plot holes with the movies. I mean, when you have Anakin doing, murdering a whole Tusken family, and then like a year later he's given a Padawan. I mean, I don't really know what to say about that, but
you go from murdering children to teaching children in 6 months.
But Lance, you just hate George Lucas. That's what questioning that is.
I guess I do. I guess I do.
Here's what I'm hoping for. One day soon, a Screenrant article about why Ahsoka is ridiculous. That's when we really know that they're paying attention, right?
Oh yeah. I think that'll come soon, around season 2.
That
comes out next year.
It will be more in the mainstream that Ahsoka's not the perfect little character that.
I also think I think there's an amazing opportunity for those mainstream writers and stuff to do this, but I think in the meantime we ought to be reminding people too that like Lucas wanted her dead, and imagine how narratively satisfying that would have been, right? It also would have like made more sense from continuity perspective, right? But what a cool thing for people to hear, particularly as like there's maybe, I don't know what the plan with Ahsoka is in the new canon, or the more shows or movies, I don't know, but like obviously everyone likes her in the new canon side. What an amazing thing to learn, right? I just think spreading that would be helpful, right?
I think
it's interesting, Chris, because there's a lot. Sorry, Brady, but
you're good.
There's a lot of like, I think Ahsoka and largely Filoni, he's actually getting a lot more hate now. Like I think I don't want to say hate, but he's getting a lot more criticism now, and it's a lot of the things that we've been saying, like Geetsleys or Geetslies. He's a YouTuber. He actually made a video basically saying what we've been saying since 2008, and I just think it's interesting that as Filoni makes more stuff, he's getting more criticism, and it's absolutely deserved. What were we gonna say? Brady?
If they had killed off Ahsoka at the end of the Clone Wars, I feel like you've got I guess one of the slang terms is Cloomers, the people that are obsessed about the Clone Wars. They would say that was the greatest death of all time. This was the greatest
what a martyr.
Story. What a martyr. Like she would be made into such a martyr, but it would be just what George Lucas wanted. Like people would be like, I've never seen episode 3 again after this. That's why Anakin, they twist it however they want, as they always do.
It's for Anakin's character arc. It makes sense.
Well, we just need a resolution, but I want to address something in the comments real quick. I know we're probably over time, but either you love Clone Wars or you hate the Clone Wars. No, I don't think it's either or. I think there needs to be a middle ground.
I'm
just recognizing that it was integrated into part of the EU. You know, post
There's no question. it's part of the
2008.
EU.
Pretty much everything has it, from Darth Plagueis to Fate of the Jedi.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yep.
We may not like it, but there needs to be like a happy medium, and that's just not existed
And some
for
great stuff came out of it.
Exactly.
as long as the
Darth-
Clone Wars existed. So I
Darth
think
Maul
that
Death Sentence, Clone Wars No Prisoners, great stories came from it. And so ultimately, I'm glad that we got some of these stories as a byproduct of it. There's some stuff I really enjoy that came out of it. So, hey, I'm not going to complain.
yeah, I'm saying
I'm glad.
not even if you like it or you don't like it.
It
That's
is
missing
there.
the mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to recognize it's there. It's part of the story, and
Yeah.
that's all. Even
It's
if you
crazy
hate
that
it,
some people don't.
you don't have to love it or
Yeah.
hate it.
I'm
All
glad
the
Scott-
discussion gets targeted whether you like it or you don't
Yeah,
like it.
you're
And
right.
that should not be the focus of the conversation.
You're definitely
I'm
right.
glad
All the
Scott
Jedi die
said
at the
that.
end. Like
I
Chris
personally
was
take
saying.
the Star Wars Visions art piece as canon, not the Isla Sakura one, the Ahsoka one where Vader kills her. I take that as canon. Yeah.
I'm glad Scott said what he said, because in my video where I addressed that to like, should TCW be removed, I said no, because it can't be removed. It's
Too
so
intrinsically tied
integrated
to it.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
so, like it's and then you mentioned no prisoners. No prisoners fixed a contradiction that was between Children of the Jedi and the prequels regarding the Jedi and marrying what, like with
Yes.
Callista.
Mhm.
So it's like you if you take TCW out, you're going to create more problems than you already have, or at the very least, those problems are still going to be there, because you're still going to have Ahsoka, you're still going to have,
And I truly believe there's a band-aid
a
for all
lot
of
of it's
TCW.
Ahsoka.
It could all be fixed.
Yeah,
I agree.
whether it should or shouldn't, it
there.
doesn't matter, because we can't change it. It
Yep,
is what
it's
it
there.
is.
It's a part of
So there's no reason to talk about it.
I have
It's
TCW
kind of like
books all over my shelf.
We should do a stream where we fix all of the continuity errors. It could run for
How many
10
years
hours.
are we gonna
10 hours.
do this for?
We'll stamp it off at 10 hours. I think that's the most you can go on YouTube. We'll
I
do
thought it was
that
2.5
much.
hours.
Oh, was it 2.5?
Yeah, I think it
That's-
is.
Yeah, that's the cutoff. Yeah.
That's how it is for us. Anyway.
But yeah, thank you all for joining for the stream this evening. Thank you to everyone in the comments for showing up. I think we talked about some interesting stuff tonight. Thanks, Scott, Brady, Titus, Chris, Lance, and Alex, who was here, for joining and discussing. It was a good, fun time. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I'm back in like 2022, seeing like the people assembled here. Like I feel like we used to stream and see each other streaming and be together more often. So it's kind of nice. I don't know. Maybe I'm nostalgic about 3 years ago.
The Avengers are back
yeah.
together, dude.
Yeah, this was fun. This was really fun. So yeah, thank you to everyone who watched as well, and we'll see you guys some other time, because as you know, the cutoff time for StreamYard is 2.5 hours, as Scott said, and you definitely can't go longer than that.
That's the limit of people's attention span, I believe. So,
So.
thanks for joining us.
I think
Thanks
it's
for
a
watching.
30-second TikTok video at this point, but
Right.
yeah, we'll see you.
Now
Bye, guys.
edit down. Bye.
Bye-bye.